And now we've come to the point where there is going to be no community consultation from here on in. So my question really is that it's not so much about supporting the residents or the reference group. It's more about the process, I would have thought. If the council thought that there was going to be something that would be released, my question is then, are you going to be criticising or complaining or objecting about the process? Thank you.
So you're talking about the process,
yes,
of the report going to the Minister?
Yes, and not coming to the council or to the public or to anyone else.
Yeah. So and I touched on this in my response to Marion earlier. The report that Council considered at our last meeting was a recommendations report that was developed by the VPA, so it wasn't a council report. So we don't have any authority to release that report. And it was a recommendations report that goes to the Minister for Planning. Now it's up to the Minister for Planning whether he wants to release that report. In normal circumstances, advice that is given to the Minister like that is confidential and not available to the public and not usually available to councils. And so we had, I guess we had an option of whether we were to receive that report confidentially and provide feedback based on our guiding principles, or not to receive the report at all. So, you know, either way, there's negatives doing either, I guess. Pardon? Yeah. So we received that report and considered it confidentially, and now, obviously, you're wondering what's in the report. We could have not received the report and not known what was written in it. So there's a bit of a double-edged sword there for us. Yeah. Hope that makes sense. Okay. Are there any further questions? We've got a few submissions to go to now. I'll now go to, I think Anne Laver is here. Sorry, I responded to your questions earlier. Yeah, sorry, I had parking problems. Oh, it's ironic. So we'll go to your statement. So you have a statement on item 8.1 and 8.4. Yeah.
Thank you. It's Anne Laver from 4 Reed Street, Northcote. Good evening, Mayor and councillors. My statement 1 is, I know that the councillors' expenses are listed in the annual report for the period 2017-18. This report used to be tabled before council on a quarterly basis, and I feel that this change in reporting provides less transparency and good governance, and I was told it's not going to be tabled before November. So I'm not happy with that.
Okay. Thank you for that feedback. Just before you go on, are you going to your second statement?
Yep.
Can I ask that we extend time again? So Councillor McCarthy.
Move extension of, I think, 10
minutes. 15 minutes, yep. And that's seconded by Councillor Greco. All those in favour? That motion is carried. Okay, we'll now hear your second statement.
Okay. Well, it would be nice to know why it's not being reported. Yeah. Anyway.
Oh, so that's a question, not a statement?
Well, I can't ask the question because I've already asked.
Thank you for your statement. So you're talking specifically to clarify councillor expenses?
Yes, that's right. The councillor expense.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Statement 2. Thank you for the recycling education information which is being tabled tonight, and I hope that the leaflets are included in or distributed to the community as well as the stickers, because I think it's a bit useless just giving the stickers without the actual leaflet. Yeah. Okay. And I'd just like to say, I hope you allow me to add, that it's very difficult to provide questions to the council if clear laws are not provided, you know, it's very difficult. Today was, you know, I was not allowed to speak on a motion. I'm not allowed to ask a question. It's very confusing, and I think Ms. Bishop, if you could try and resolve that issue so we could have clear governance at all, so everyone knows what they're allowed to say, what questions they can ask and can't ask.
Yep, thank you for that feedback, and we did have a discussion about that, about the review of the local law and things that need to be improved in that local law, and we've definitely picked up on some of the feedback you've given us, so thank you for taking the time to provide that. Thank you. Okay, the next statement is from Con Papasturgio on item 9.1.
Madam Mayor, councillors, how are you? Yeah, my name's Con Papasturgio. I reside at 80 Queen Street, Reservoir. Yeah, I'm here tonight to see whether I could convince you guys to change the permit planning that was presented by the parking management. Now, I believe that on the north side, which I live, there's I think about 10 parking spaces that they come up with, and on the south side, they said there was probably about 13 on the north side, 9 on the south side. Now, my question to the council is, now being on the north side, the parking is pretty restricted. Now, we've got a set of units that are being built at the corner of our High Street and Queen Street, which is going to have about 23 units. I'm pretty sure you're aware of it. And when they're completed, parking's going to be such a pain to even park in front of your place. And only just recently being a grandfather, like, it's going to be pretty hard parking 300 metres down the road with my grandchild under one arm and heaps of groceries on the other. So not only that, but on the south side, if you had a look, nearly all the residents on that side have got a off-street parking, and a lot of them have got a double garage and a driveway. So we've still got a 2-hour restriction placed. Now, I like the council to recommend that not only do we keep the 2-hour parking, but if we can have that for 24 hours a day on the north side to limit the parking to the residents that live there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your submission. Councillors will consider the points that you've raised when they make the decision tonight as it's on the agenda. So thank you. I'll now call on Corey Sheehan to speak on 9.1.
Hi, my name is Corey Sheehan from number 84 Queen Street. I second what Con just said. He's a neighbour of mine. I don't think people in the street realise the impact it's going to have on the street with the 23 townhouses being built in the corner of Queen and High. It's one car park per townhouse. So obviously if 2 or 3 people live there, there's going to be more impact. And as I said, I'll be parking down probably Arlington or Alexandra Street, or maybe the next street up, which is King William. So I feel that a lot of people in the street don't realise the impact it's going to have on the street. So, and I second everything that Con said, so I won't double up and waste everyone's time. But thank you.
Okay. Thank you for coming along tonight and for sharing. Thank you. And the next person is Faisal Nasser. Now, I read out your question before and responded to it. I'm sorry you weren't here. Okay, all right. It's all these falcons. They're not usually here in the crowd. No.
Thanks for having me tonight. So my name is Faisal Nasser. I live on Queen Street, so I'm neighbours of Con and Corey. So basically tonight I asked the council members to vote to retain the current parking restrictions. The residents that aren't able to purchase the parking permits live in new developments built after 2004, or 20 December 2004. These residents, a lot of them have double car parks or triple car parks, in fact, and off-street parking as well. And they've just got more cars than they have parking, unfortunately. That's where we are. And basically, the Darebin Council regulations that rightly protects residents in established properties and inhibits overdevelopment. And we agree this is fair and reasonable, and we'd like it to be upheld. I would also like to refer to the extract from the 2017 residential parking permit policy. 1.1 in the objectives, it states that the parking permit schemes are to give residents priority access to car parking in either their street or residents close by, and to reduce the intrusion of other traffic into residential streets, and to maintain residential amenity. Basically, since the implementation of this, that's worked really well in terms of our parking restrictions. They've worked extremely well. We've been able to park, close or nearby to our houses without the intrusion. Previously, there was 30 or 40 cars on either side of the road, and I've been hit by a car before trying to get out of my car just because there's been that many vehicles coming down Queen Street. And now with the new parking reduction in terms of the speed zoning and so forth, it's worked even better. So I just encourage the council to keep it that way, to just help the street maintain its level of volume of traffic and also the number of cars parking on either side. You're also aware that there's construction happening with Kirra Nursing Home, and that's going to further impact the ability to actually park on the street, just because there's no adequate parking on that site for visitors and so forth that come to visit. And we know people drive, we know that, and parking's getting even worse, and it's been on the news and everything like that. I also basically object to the Transport Officer's analysis in selecting to have restrictions removed off the south side removed off the north side and maintained on the south side. The reason there's more parking on the north side is because we don't have off-street parking. We don't have driveways. On the south side, there's driveways, hence less parking spaces on the street, basically. And that's the reason they've got driveways. They can park their cars off the street, and they're not impacted by any type of permits, basically. So it's just going to diminish even more the opportunities to park near my house. I've got an 18-month-old daughter, and we've had to park down the road to take her into the street. And then while I was doing that, I got robbed in my car, and I got a police report to show that. So that's what happens, and it's real. And then, so I don't like being mugged in my street because I had to park further away. And then it's just affecting my ability to live around Darebin, basically. And so basically, I would vote to keep them as they are. Don't change the parking restrictions, basically, because it's just not going to help anybody. But if the outcome, so if the outcome is going to be that we need to come to some sort of compromise, if you can please vote to keep it on the north side and remove it off the south side, you probably have a lot better outcome, because I know the residents on the south side, they don't want it, but the residents on the north side want it. And to keep the peace and to maintain that ability to park, then I encourage you to do so. Thank you.
Thank you for your submission this evening. Okay, and we have Sarah Brady to speak on 8.3.
My name's Sarah Brady. I'm the president of the Darebin Women's Sports Club, and I'd like to speak in support of proposal 8.3. The Darebin Women's Sports Club was founded by a group of determined women who wanted to create a truly safe and inclusive environment for females to play AFL football. Back then, they had to fight every day for the barest essentials enjoyed by already existing clubs. With the unbelievable support of the Darebin Council, over the past 28 years, we've not only managed to survive, but together we've actually created something really special. Together we've created a club that has more than 550 active female members across 4 traditionally male-dominated sports, and a notable list of playing alumni who consistently give back to the club and the wider Darebin community. However, there's still a lot of work to be done. Despite immense population growth in Darebin, female sport participation rates are still low. Together we can arrest this trend. When women and girls are active and healthy, the community benefits. We have an unwavering commitment to female participation, gender equity and inclusion. We have produced quality citizens and empowered girls and women on and off the field. Together we've created an enduring and mutually beneficial legacy. But regrettably, I'm not standing before you to examine how much we've accomplished for the women and girls of Darebin. I'm not here to list the amazing people that have grown, developed and benefited from the Darebin Falcons. Household names like Daisy Pearce, Darcy Vesio, Katie Brennan, Mel Hickey, and I can continue. Today I'm here to seek support in what is arguably our toughest fight yet. Our legacy as a club, community, and as an example of what equality can achieve is at risk. If the proposed partnership does not proceed, I want to be clear about the impacts on the club and the community. Firstly, we risk losing our identity as an elite women's club, one that we've all worked so hard to earn and strive to maintain. The Darebin Council also risks losing its association with women's AFL at its most visible level. Secondly, the Falcons players risk being absorbed into a men's club, where the men's competition takes priority, where women are given opportunities according to the existing male-dominated development structure. Finally, Darebin risk losing the iconic elite female team, a team that understands women of all ages, builds quality programs, fosters inclusion and understands that creating a sense of belonging provides the unparalleled opportunity for women to realise their true potential. Our logo, the Defiant Falcon, stands for so much more than a sports club. It's a visible demonstration of the power of community. Thank you for your time, your consideration, your continuing support, and I ask that we work together to continue the brilliant and vital work those trailblazing Darebin women devoted themselves to nearly 3 decades ago. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we've got through all the questions and submissions. Is there anyone else? Have I missed anybody? No? Great. Moving now on to item 6, Councillor Lawrence.
Madam Mayor, I seek indulgence of yourself to read a personal statement on my
health. Okay. In order for that to happen, we need to suspend standing orders. So there's a motion moved by Councillor Rennie, seconded by Councillor McCarthy. All those in favour? And against? Yeah, that's right. I'll declare that carried. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Maybe, yes. Sorry.
Just ask you to hold that up to make sure that we can hear you.
Yes, I have to apologise because I've quite ill, so I'm not going to be very clear on my nose and things. I'd like to read the following statement, personal statement regarding my health, and unfortunately I have to do that in relation to certain backgrounding that's been going on in the media. At the start of February 2017, I was diagnosed with inoperable stage 4 lung cancer and given 3 months to live. This was later extended to 2 years. My right lung was full of tumours and lesions, and 3 tumours were pushing into the nerves in my spine. I was treated at the Olivia Newton-John Wellness Centre with radiation therapy, chemotherapy and immunotherapy. I also adopted over 40 lifestyle and diet changes to assist my immune system. The cancer was not limited to my lungs, and I developed tumours in my thyroid, adrenal gland and also lymph nodes. In addition to the cancer, I developed inflamed lungs in February this year as a result of a reaction to the immunotherapy. During the past 18 months, I've not been given the same treatment as other councillors with cancer in other cities, such as Melton, where a councillor with breast cancer was given extended leave by that council. And I note that mayor who did that is actually going into state parliament at the moment, Justin Mammarello. But anyway, on return to council, I was has been. Sorry, I've just missed my spot. Yes, instead of being given extended leave by the council, I've been pressured to take small blocks of leave by the Darebin administration. I was told that I would be targeted if I took too much leave. As a consequence, I did not take leave to cover the entire 5 months of chemo. I also came back to council too early and subsequently developed four old tumours and one new tumour. There is a need for a uniform approach to leave and recovery for cancer patients in local government. In my experience at Darebin, my personal medical information has not been protected and has been used in a targeted fashion. I currently have no faith in the administration or the leadership at Darebin in relation to my personal health information or any return to work process. In fact, there isn't any. And I would request the Minister of Local Government develop standard procedures and guidelines for councillors with cancer. And that's my statement.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence, for sharing that with us. And I personally, if there is anything that I can do to support you, my door is always open. Now we'll need to move on. We'll need to resume standing orders. So, that's a move by Councillor Rennie and seconded by Councillor Greco. All those in favour to resume standing orders, and against? That motion is carried. Okay. Next item is item 6, petitions. Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor. I have 2 petitions that I'd like to present tonight. The first petition is in relation to our aged care services, and I have 184 petitions which have been handed to me both by Robin Vogt and also by Keith Coffey. I'll read the petition. The petition reads as follows. We, the undersigned residents and ratepayers of Darebin, petition Council to publicly commit to maintain its current role as a provider of aged care services, including transport, cleaning, personal care, meals, home maintenance and respite care into the future. We urge Council not to abandon its role in providing the above aged care services in view of the federal government's privatisation agenda of aged care services. We are proud that Darebin Council is a long-standing provider of high-quality aged care services and has built a strong and trusted reputation as a preferred provider with elderly residents and their families in the community. In Darebin, 25,534 people, which represents 18.8% of the total population, are aged over 60, and many are receiving or will soon require support services to enable them to remain in their home. Finally, we firmly believe that current and future aged community members should continue to have the choice to receive home care services directly from trusted and committed council staff. And Mayor, I move a motion that we receive the petition and specifically state that we received 184 petitions and request the CEO to respond accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. So that's moved by Councillor Greco, seconded by Councillor Rennie. All those in favour? Declare the motion carried. Would you like to go to the second petition?
I have a second petition that's been handed to me. This petition relates to a traffic issue along Story Road in Reservoir. The petition's been submitted by Phyllis Vespucci of 26 Story Road, Reservoir. And the petition reads as follows. Petition to Darebin Council. And the petition is in dot points, so I'll go through the dot points. First dot point, Story Road Reservoir is a narrow residential street with very long blocks. On the southern side, approximately 80 metres long. On the northern side, approximately 68 metres long. Second point, each time a house is sold, between 4 and 6 apartments are built on each block. Next point, many of the residents of those dwellings park in the street. This means that the street is clogged with cars. Next point, add to this the trucks and vehicles of building workers and you have traffic chaos. Often it is almost impossible to back out of a driveway because cars and trucks are parked close to driveways and all along the street. Therefore, the request is that Darebin Council, one, that the parking be restricted to one side of Story Road, and two, that in future 2 parking spaces must be provided on site for each apartment in new blocks of apartments. And again, there are 29 petitioners, and I submit those to the council and request that that they be tabled and that the CEO respond accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's moved by Councillor Greco. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Rennie. All those in favour? That motion is carried. Are there any further petitions? No? Okay, we'll move now on to urgent business. There was an item of urgent business, but I'll get the CEO to clarify that status of that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As councillors will be aware, I had proposed that Council tonight consider an item of urgent business. I wish to withdraw that item. It was in relation to the Solar Savers program. You would be aware that the state government has announced recently that they intend to introduce a program of subsidy in relation to the use, the implementation of solar panels. There was a question about the eligibility of Darebin residents participating in our own solar savers program. That question has been resolved this evening, and so officers' advice to me is that there's no need for a resolution now. So I'd like to withdraw that, please.
Okay. Is there any other urgent business? No. Moving now, Councillor Lawrence.
Madam Mayor, I'd move formally that we make a change to the agenda to consider the urgent notices of motion, given there was a number of people in the gallery expressing interest about
So there is a motion by Councillor Lawrence to reorder the agenda to consider item 9, notices of motion. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Gregg. Okay. Oh, sorry. Item 10. Sorry, item 10, notices of motion. Got that the wrong way around.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, that's seconded by Councillor Greco. All those in favour? And against? Motion's carried. Okay, we'll move now to 10.1, councillor briefing sessions. Councillor Lawrence. Okay, Councillor Lawrence, you'll move that motion?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'll move that motion.
Okay. Is there a seconder? There's no seconder.
Yeah, I'm happy to second the motion.
Councillor Greco, I'll ask if people want to second the motion. Make sure you do, because I nearly declared that motion lapsed. Okay, Councillor Lawrence, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Councillors in this room would be aware of probably I've raised this issue before in our review of governance arrangements, I think in this term and probably in the last term. And again, at that point, we introduced webcasting, and we've sort of been forefront of that in the chamber. And I believe we should also do it in the briefing sessions so that our community actually shares in those briefing sessions and the mystery around the briefing sessions is lifted. I understand there's some commercial and confidence issues that come, but again, we have the same thing in the chamber, so maybe those can be heard in camera, but at the end, because you can then turn the camera off. But by most standards, the things that are discussed in the briefing should be shared with the whole community.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Greco.
Look, I reserve my right to speak.
Okay. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Williams.
This council was the first council that actually went to webcasting, doing council meetings. And in order for us to be as transparent and accountable as possible, I can't see why that we can't go to briefings unless there are confidential matters or financial matters that don't get videotaped. I understand there's some sensitive items. And I'm just thinking of going forward. We've come a long way by having video and technology, that maybe this is the way of the future, whether it's something that we vote on or don't vote on tonight, but it may be something that maybe all councils will be looking at in the future also.
Are there any further speakers? Councillor Messina.
Through you, Mayor Slurth. I have no issues with webcasting a briefing. However, I do have an issue with the emotive language and the concerns, especially it says concerns of excessive secrecy by this council. I have a problem with that statement. And that to me says that we're discussing things in secret and we're creating this fear and euphoria in the community. I have a problem with that particular tone of a particular motion. I have no issues with discussing the webcasting, addressing it through the briefing, but I do have a problem with the emotive language.
Thank you, Councillor Messina. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Lassurf. I'll be speaking against this motion. There is not a council in Victoria that makes its briefings open to the public. The state government does not make briefings open to the public, neither does the federal government. And the reason that people don't make briefings available and open to the public is because they are not decision-making forums. They are forums where things are discussed and thrashed out and ideas are floated and questions are asked. And in order for them to be productive, they need to be spaces where people can do those things openly and where people can explore issues. A number of external speakers come to our briefings. I don't believe they would actually be happy to come and give us frank and fearless advice if those briefings were being broadcast to the community. And I think ultimately that means that we would receive less advice and it would not increase transparency. I think it would actually drive discussions outside of a forum where we're all present and all the staff are present, because people do naturally have discussions with staff about what's going on. There is nothing secret about those. It's about the appropriate forum. And this chamber is where decisions are made, and rightly so. And we were one of the first councils in Victoria to live stream these meetings and have an exceptionally good record on transparency and openness in respect of that.
Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Mayor Lassurf. Just briefly, I'd just like to point out that in the local law, which is current, the governance local law, it says 11, number 5, the briefings are not open to the public and will generally be held at the Darebin Council, Preston. And so I think it would be going against the local law. So it says the briefings are not open to the public, and I believe that webcasting would make it open to the public, and I don't think it's appropriate with the way that it all goes. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I would like to move a slight amendment to the what's here to assist the debate.
As a seconder, I think that as a seconder you cannot move an amendment. We'll just double check on that.
Okay, then, yep.
No, so you can't move an amendment as the seconder. You can withdraw as the seconder, and then we can find a new seconder, and if we do, then you can move the amendment.
Okay, I may withdraw and hopefully find a new seconder. It's a big risk, then I may not get a chance, yeah.
Yeah, no, here, hang on. We'll just clarify, because is a bit concerned about that. All right, so we have Councillor Greco withdrawing as the seconder of the motion. Councillor Williams will become the seconder of the motion. Councillor Greco, you would like to put an amendment.
Look, thank you, Mayor, for resolving that little technical issue there. Look, after hearing some of the debate, look, I acknowledge the point that was made by Councillor Newton that it is in our local laws, and I also acknowledge the point that was made by Councillor Rennie.
Hang on, sorry. You're getting into a debate. Would you like to propose your amendment? And then if you need to convince people of it, then you
my
can.
apologies. My amendment reads as follows: that Council receive a report to record and place all councillor briefings on the webcast to address current community concerns of excessive secrecy by this council. Could I just correct that? That Council receive a report and place that Council receives a report to record and place all councillor briefings on the webcast to address current community concerns. Full stop.
Okay. Does the mover and seconder accept that amendment? Councillor Lawrence.
Happy to accept that amendment.
Okay.
Yes.
Councillor Williams. Okay, so that's been accepted. And so that will now become the substantive motion. Councillor Greco, you haven't spoken to the motion. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, no, I'll speak to the amendment. Yeah.
Oh no, the amendment's been accepted.
Oh, okay. So I'll speak to the motion.
So you can just speak to the motion.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'm just picking up on the various points that were made. There was 3 pertinent points that I think were made. One was by Councillor Newton about that it is part of our local laws, so we need to go through a process in relation to changing the local laws, and that's currently underway. We're doing that. The other point that was raised, that it's acknowledged, is that sometimes when things are discussed, even at council meetings, that we have to conduct those meetings in camera because of the confidential nature of the item that we may be discussing. It could be a contractual item, could be a personal item, etc. And also, I've tried to remove, to take on Councillor Lena Messina's point about, probably unnecessary for us to be emotive in relation to this. If Councillor Messina considers the language to be emotive, I've removed that so that that obstacle has been taken away. I think it's worthy for us to get a report from our administration about how we can live stream some of our briefings. I think it'll be important for us to do that because, look, I'm all for transparency and I'm all for openness. Even though other councils have not done this, that's not stop us from doing it. We want to be leaders in many aspects of the work that we do here as council. Like it was said, we were one of the first to actually have live streaming of council meetings. Why can't we have live streaming of briefings and be one of the first to do that? I think it will really put us out there as a council that really wants to listen and be completely open and honest and transparent with our community. Briefings are an important space. Yes, decisions are not made during briefings, but that's where ideas are formed. That's where ideas are shaped, and that's where we actually influence what actually comes to council for us to make a decision. So I would really welcome a report coming back to council to see how we can navigate and how we can manage open and transparent meetings, open and transparent briefings into the future.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Are there any further speakers? No? Because the motion was amended, the mover doesn't have the right of reply. So I will now put that to the vote. All those in favour and against? That motion is lost. Moving now to the next item, 10.2, scheduling of future council meetings. Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I move that and I'll speak to it if I get a second.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Williams. Councillor Lawrence, would you like to speak to the motion now?
Yes, Madam Mayor, recently attended La Trobe Ward meeting and managed to talk to a number of residents, and people were voicing frustration with the current meeting cycles. And again, we've had the issue of being raised that perhaps we have too many notices of motion and that we have to actually restrict our local laws and cut back notices of motion. And I was shocked to actually hear residents can't speak to notices of motion. I didn't realise we had that in there. So with all that, rather than take the route of silencing democracy on notices of motion, seems to me we need to go back to what we had for over 20 years, which was 2 meetings every month. Now, I don't want to bore people with experience on council since 1996, but basically the other important issue about a 2-weekly cycle is things do arise that need to be attended to contractually, or things failing, like walls from stadiums and all sorts of things, and waiting 4 weeks for a meeting. I wouldn't want to do that in the circumstance that we had with the Darebin Stadium, where, you know, the Besser brick walls were actually falling down and it was closed by the Education Department. So there is another practicality around having those 2 weekly meetings. And I think it's been having a 3-week cycle rather than having 2 per month is an unnecessary restriction on our community.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Wimms.
Thank you. Our local laws are coming to council, I think it's about the 12th of November, and we're doing quite a few changes regarding our laws. Now, in saying that, I feel that with our growing population and the issues that are rising within our community, I think it's important that we still continue doing fortnightly council meetings, because I think more issues will come up, and not only we have them in the evening, I think we should have them at different times of the day to allow different parts of our community and different age groups that be able to come and attend to those meetings. But I think it's really important, as I said, that we've got the growing population. There's going to be more issues arising as the years continue, and I think we need to be as available as possible to all in our community, that we hear for them and to listen to them, whether it's at night time or daytime.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? No? Oh, Councillor Griffin.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'm going to speak in favour of this motion and support that we return back to 2 meetings per month. I must say also, and I'm happy to admit, I originally voted that we would try out the 3 meetings every 3 weeks. And we've had a bit of an experience of that, about 1.5 years of experience of that. And I'm afraid to say that I don't see it actually working in its fullest extent. The feedback that I've had, that it's sometimes very confusing for the community in terms of the dates, because we're on a 3-week cycle. Before it was much simpler. It was twice per month, the first 2 Mondays, or the first and third Monday of each month. Also, having two meetings per month, I think what's important, and something that we should not pass by, is that it gives it's an opportunity where there is an open decision-making forum where the community, through the gallery or through webcasting, can actually see the council in action. This is the moment, right now, when we have council meetings, when we actually make decisions. And we should open those moments as much as possible to community, for the community to see in terms of how we actually do our work. Also, what I've noticed over this period of time is that when we've had 3 meetings, lots of urgent items, we've had to sort of rush them onto the agenda, which is not a good way of doing things. And even tonight we had an urgent motion, and also. What I found, particularly in the last this year, that our meetings are finishing later. They're finishing, almost at 11 o'clock. So there's a lot of work. There's a lot of motions that are there that we need to discuss and have open and frank discussions about. And I think that if we had 2 meetings, we will be able to get through the work in a much more efficient and effective way.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Amir.
I'm going to be speaking against this motion. There's a few reasons for that. So, of course, the council meetings we have is at the cornerstone of the work we do as councillors. We can't make big decisions without having council meetings. We need to have these meetings so we can talk to the community, so we can meet our legislative obligations, and also put forward our policy directions and strategic decision making. what I've seen in the last few months, I would disagree with my colleagues that the experiment has been a failure. What we've seen is we've got meetings that are meaty, that we have a lot to talk about. We did have a string of meetings where there was only a couple of items at a time. And that is quite an expensive way to do things. These meetings do cost money. They are, it's a lot of work for the staff that are here. Moreland Council has meetings monthly, so currently the monthly proposal would be in line with that. So what I would like to see is to be retaining these meetings for their intended purposes, which is as one of many forms of communication with the community. We all receive calls every day from residents, emails, we have ward meetings. Any resident who asks to meet with me, I always say yes. There are lots of different ways to speak to councillors, and there's probably some people in the audience who would actually prefer to meet with me one-on-one for coffee rather than sitting through 4 hours. So I don't think we should be setting up an expectation that this is the one and only place to have those conversations. And instead, I would hope that we can have a focus on these meetings in those, the big things that really matter to everyone across the community around those big actions, policy decisions, strategy, and not necessarily trying to make council meetings all things to all people.
Thank you, Councillor Amir. Are there any further speakers? No. Councillor Lawrence, would you like to use your right of reply?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I think I've heard councillors around the table talk about strategy and those sorts of things, and I think having 2 meetings a month allows more strategy, and it also allows more debate and scrutiny by residents, because not everyone picks up every meeting, especially if the meeting agenda is crowded. And one of the important things about local government, being closest government to the people, is that we do actually modify our decisions, whereas actually with state and federal governments, you have to chuck them out every 4 years because they kind of rule us like dictators. But council ain't like that. Council is like a family. It's like a school committee. We're always adjusting our decisions so that they don't have negative, divisive impacts. And you need to allow time in meetings for that. You need to allow time for submissions, amendments, debate.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. I'll now put that to the vote. All those in favour and against? Motion is lost. The next item is 10.3, infrastructure gaps in Latrobe and Cazaly wards. Councillor Lawrence. Move that motion.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'm happy to move the motion, and I'll
Thank you.
speak.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Williams. Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, Madam Mayor, this motion here seeks to address a number of infrastructure gaps that's been highlighted by members of the community tonight and members of the community in other forums such as ward meeting and plus individual consultations. And that process is needed because, as I firmly believe, as I have voted against the 4-year plan, the 4-year plan embeds inequality in infrastructure, in particular leisure activities, by cementing $60 million investment in a pool which is already a 50-metre outdoor pool, and restricts to a minimum of $12 million in a pool that is only a 25-metre pool, yet in an area where it services 2 wards, which is expected to take most of the development over the next 10 years. So I think we've got a major problem in the 4-year plan. I think it goes against needs-based funding. It goes against the actual development and population projections. And we need a 6-year plan to try and bring it back into line and start looking at infrastructure across the whole city.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
I'd like to reserve my rights to speak.
Are there any further speakers? Councillor Messina.
The term infrastructure refers to a fundamental facilities and systems, which include services, facilities necessary for its economic and function. Soft infrastructure such as economic, health, social and cultural standards, parks and gardens. If we're referring to transport infrastructure, this council is heavily advocating for the removal of Bell Street, Extension 11 tram, and we just received the Here Is Your elevated rail on Reservoir without the road infrastructure. Preston, being a non-marginal seat, doesn't get any assistance. The future of Preston Precinct should be relying on the DCP contribution for the evolution of this area. What this council has inherited is a mountain of assets with zero maintenance, and we've been working tirelessly to bring assets up to an acceptable standard. What we have for this time round is NARC and the multi-sport stadium that tip the figures, unfortunately, into a different ward. What surprises me is that I've heard from councillors who have said that they've used NARC for a decade and I'd see it need its upgrading. Isn't it a councillor's role to bring this to the attention of council? Yet they did nothing because it wasn't in their ward. I question what they did on previous councils to allow assets to be so run down and have such high risk for our community. Here was the dilemma. We have historically councillors advocating for their ward, using funds for wasteful master plans, but a visionary councillor should be advocating for the whole of the municipality. What it should be is a strategic plan based on the needs analysis, identifying gaps based on the whole of the municipality. Councillors have only voted for a 4-year term. What this council needs is to do more, provide a strategic plan for a period of 10 years, which incorporates a demographic or a future population growth. The results of the research is beyond our 2-year plus term. What we should be asking for is a Darebin plan that exceeds 4 years and perhaps a 10-year plan to identify the gaps and proper needs analysis.
Thank you, Councillor Messina. Are there any... Councillor Lawrence?
Councillor Messina talking for or against the motion? I wasn't sure.
I think she was speaking against it.
Against the motion.
Are there any further speakers? Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I have a slight amendment to the motion, and that the amendment is that where it says a 6-year plan, that we insert the word there, 10-year plan.
Councillor Lawrence, do you accept that amendment?
Madam Mayor, as one of a number of councillors who had in place an $80 million 8-year capital...
Councillor Lawrence, Councillor, do you accept the amendment?
I'm getting to that.
No, well, it's a yes or no question. We can go to a debate.
One of the
Councillor Lawrence, I'll ask you to resume your seat if you were going to continue.
I'm going to answer the question.
Well, I'm asking you to say yes or no.
Only councillors here who oversaw an
Councillor
$80
Lawrence.
million capital works plan here. I'm happy to support it.
All you had to say was yes.
Madam Mayor, I've said yes.
I'd like to remind you that we all come here and we all agree to treat each other with respect and that there are rules, and I asked you a simple question and asked for a yes and no. You didn't want to do that, and that's fine, but now I'm asking you to be respectful as we go forward. Councillor Williams, do you accept
Madam Mayor, point of order, if you could tell me what is disrespectful about reminding the chamber I've supported an 8-year capital works plan in the past?
Because I asked you a question. Councillor Lawrence, can you please resume your seat?
As a point of order, Madam Mayor, a point of bias and a point of impartiality, you haven't pulled up false statements that were made in this chamber just then about capital works.
I didn't hear it.
You are pulling me up on a factual one.
I did not hear any false statements. If there are anything that was said within the debate, then all councillors are welcome to raise points of order if there is a false statement. I didn't hear any false statements, but anyone can raise them as they come up. All I asked was a simple question. I was expecting a simple answer. That was all I was asking for. Councillor Williams, do you accept the amendment?
Madam Mayor, I would raise dissent with your point of order because my statement was fairly simple. It was grade 10 English.
What is your point of order, Councillor Lawrence?
That your ruling on my answer is inappropriate bullying.
Okay, if we want to go there, just one moment. Yep. Okay. Okay, so there is a motion before us to dissent against the chairperson's ruling. That's a motion that's moved by Councillor Lawrence. Is there a seconder for that motion?
Happy to second.
Okay, that's seconded by Councillor Williams. Because the motion has a mover and seconder, I will now step out of the chair.
May I ask Councillor Lawrence to speak to his motion, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I rose...
I'm going to go back a step because I was accepting the 10-year amendment that the mayor...
Oh, no.
It's before that. We have to go back to his...
Oh, okay. Apologies. Yeah. Go. Sorry.
Yes, Madam Mayor. The treatment that I've just received in this chamber, where I was giving a 10-word answer to a question, isn't in accord with the verbose responses that are tolerated by other people who are considered part of the dominant faction. The false statements about the infrastructure in the city, I imagine was said out of ignorance, but they were not pulled up, again, out of ignorance. And yet I was pulled up mentioning a very pertinent question, which was that $80 million of electricity funds was spent on an accelerated capital works program in this city over an 8-year period. And the implication I'd had previously, which wasn't pulled up, that was somehow councillors, and I think I was being targeted, had not invested in capital works or overseen capital works in this city. In fact, I'm sitting in this chair. I've overseen hundreds of millions of dollars of investment in this city, including the Reservoir Civic Centre, including the new Reservoir Library, including the Central Hub, including the Keon Park, and have prosecuted a renewal of Reservoir that's never been done since the Second World War. Now, the gap is the pool, and that has to be addressed. But there's no reason why I'm subjected to insinuations about my performance as a councillor, long-term councillor here, and then pulled up when I mention a fact, which is that there was an 8-year, $80 million accelerated capital works program.
There is no debate. We will put that to the vote. Also,
I'm sorry, I thought there's an opportunity for Councillor Lawrence to speak to the motion. There should be an opportunity for others.
Oh, okay. No.
It was last time.
Acting Chair, could we just get an update of where we are at in relation to the meeting?
Hang on, I just want to check the rules. I'm sorry, because if Councillor Lawrence gets to speak to...
Could you speak at the microphone?
If Councillor Lawrence gets to talk about why he wants to dissent, I would like to respond.
Please do. Bullying in action.
Okay, so... Okay. Would you like to speak to the motion, Madam Lister?
So I'd like to make a statement as per the local law. In terms of the ruling against the chairperson's dissent, I was simply asking Councillor Lawrence to state whether he was supportive or opposed to an amendment, which is what is within the local law. If he wants to debate the merits of the amendment, then he can do so if the amendment is moved as a motion. But if the amendment is accepted by the mover and seconder, which is what I was trying to attain, then we didn't have to go to a debate. There isn't an opportunity to debate it unless it is moved as a motion, which is why I asked for Councillor Lawrence not to provide commentary but to provide an answer to the question.
There'll be no debate. All those in favour of the motion put forward by
Can I
Councillor...
just ask a question?
There is no debate.
Can you just explain why there's no debate, please? Just for the benefit of the gallery.
As per the local law, there is no debate. Can I read out? Yep. There is no debate. Okay, the only right applies from the chair, so we will put that to the vote.
Sorry, Councillor Macera, I think Councillor Greco was just wanting to know what the motion was that he was voting on.
That the chairperson's ruling be dissented from. So therefore we will vote. I can't hear you. According to the local law, there was a motion of dissent. So at that particular time, we have the councillor that reads that motion, and then we have the mayor that will be speaking against that motion and have the right to reply. We will then go to the vote based on your original motion. So there's all in favour in terms of the dissension. We take that to the vote now. All those in favour? All those against? That motion is lost.
Okay, so we'll go back to the amendment that we were considering. Councillor Greco proposed to change the word from 6 to 10. That was accepted by the mover. Is it accepted by the seconder?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so that will be incorporated into the substantive motion. We'll make that change up on the screen. Did you want to speak to the motion, Councillor Greco? So not to the amendment?
Waiting for the call, that's all.
Yep. So not to the amendment, but to the motion.
Yep. Okay. I thank the mover and the seconder for including my little amendment there of 10 years. And just in relation to why I moved, why I put that amendment is that we're currently considering a 10-year capital works program for the city. So I thought of increasing from 6 to 10 years in order to be consistent with that. So that explains the slight amendment change. In relation to the substance of the motion, I think what's been put here forward by Councillor Lawrence, I think has merit, councillors. And why it has merit, councillors, is that right from the outset, I have been critical of the council plan. From the first time that the council plan was presented to us, even the lead up to the preparation of the council plan, I strenuously was trying to prosecute a case that the council plan had to incorporate other additional elements in order to make it an inclusive council plan for the whole of the city. And not only for the whole of the city from a capital works perspective, but for the whole of the city also to take into account the diversity of our city. At the moment, from what I've experienced, that the council plan is skewed towards, particularly towards the southern end of the city. And if you just have a look at the council agendas in the last period, a lot of the activity is focused on the southern end of the city. Even if you look at the council agenda for this meeting, it is also focused on the southern end of the city. If you look at the council plan, the big ticket items are all centred in basically in the northern end of the city. There are a few little things there in the southern end of the city. Thank you for the correction. In the southern end of the city. And I don't think it's appropriate that we have a council plan that is skewed in that way. We're all here as councillors. We represent different wards as councillors, and that we should ensure that all of the city is looked after. And this is the final point that I want to excuse myself for being over time, is that where the greatest disadvantage is, councillors, and we all know this for a fact, the greatest disadvantage is predominantly in the northern end of the city, and that deserves its rightful attention.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Are there any further speakers to this motion? Councillor Williams, I think you were the seconder, so you're reserved. Yep, we'll hear from you now.
We're talking about infrastructure. I think it's important that whether you're talking about any type of infrastructure, there's a lot involved. It doesn't just happen in a 4-year period. Infrastructure actually takes a lot of work, whether it's community consultation, whether it's the planning, the process, reports, advocating for money, and obviously putting money aside regarding budget. We are very limited with what we can do with our budget. We do spend a lot of money on everyday things, whether it's council assets, but when it comes to infrastructure, it is a huge amount of money, and it does take a huge amount of people and time to put those gaps and try and close them. So I can't see how things can be done in a 4-year period, and I'd be delighted to see things also as a 10-year plan.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Are there any further speakers? No, because there was an amendment, there is no right of reply. Councillor Lawrence?
Is there a right of reply?
There is no right of reply. There was an amendment.
I've been defamed about my efforts in capital works and I don't get a right of reply.
No, because there was an amendment to the motion. There is no right of reply. So I will, if there are no further speakers...
Lucky there's social media.
I will now put that to the vote. All those in favour? Okay. And against? That motion is lost.
If I could,
Councillor Rennie.
I'd like to move a procedural motion. Notwithstanding the earlier motion that we had to reorder the agenda, I would like to move a motion that we move now to item 8.3 on the agenda before resuming at 10.4 in light of the very high number of people who are here to
we won't. Okay.
that.
No, so we'll just don't get into the debate. You would like to move a procedural motion.
Mayor, could I just raise a point of order?
Hang on, just we've got two people talking to me at the same time. Councillor Greco's on his feet with a point of order.
Thanks, Mayor. I understand the point that Councillor Rennie's
Hang on, we're not
make.
getting into a debate though.
And my point is that whether the rules actually permit us to do that.
Yeah, so we will just check that now. Yep. Okay, so the local law says that we can change the order of business by resolution of council. It doesn't limit the amount of times we do that. We can do that at any point in the meeting. So there is a motion moved by Councillor Rennie to bring forward item 8.3 to consider now and then continue with the reordered agenda as per the previous resolution. So that's moved by Councillor Rennie and seconded by Councillor McCarthy. Is there any debate?
I move it be put.
Pardon? Okay, it's been moved to be put. Okay. Well, we'll go straight to the vote. All those in favour to reorder the agenda? That motion is carried. We'll move now to 8.3, promoting women and girls in sport funding. Councillor McCarthy. Councillor McCarthy?
Yes, happy to move that.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Rennie. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I'd like to apologise for the members of the public, and particularly the members from the Darebin Falcons Darebin Women's Sports Club who've joined us here this evening, who've sat through very patiently a lot of items that were originally later on the agenda and were unfortunately brought forward. So I'd like to take a moment to actually reflect on what this report proposes, which I think is revolutionary in all the right ways. As councillors would have heard, and as hopefully councillors should well know, Darebin is home, of course, to the Darebin Women's Sports Club, which, as the report outlines, undertakes an extraordinary amount of work and has done over a number of years to not only create a platform and an opportunity for women and girls to engage in a range of sports, four were mentioned earlier. It's also the only women's team, women's club in the women's VFL that's actually run by women. And I think this is an important point. Every other club that participates in the elite competition of the women's VFL is actually managed by organisations that often either have a lot of men on their board or certainly a majority of men on their board. So it is significant from a gender equity perspective that we have not only the women's participation and girls' participation in the club activities, but also in the governance and management. That puts us in a very unique position and a very unusual position when we have a proposal which is what we have here this evening. The proposal itself, I think, is, as I mentioned before, quite revolutionary, because what it does is it allows us to consider a partnership over the next 2 years with the opportunity to extend that partnership for a further 2 years, and that would take us well beyond this current council term. The partnership would not only provide the funding certainty to ensure that the Darebin Falcons is able to participate in the women's VFL competition, but importantly, it would also provide a number of benefits to the Darebin community. And I just draw councillors' attention to item 2 in the motion, which actually outlines the elements of the partnership that would be delivered by the Darebin Falcons back to the Darebin community. They include advocacy for girls and women's sport and leadership, programs to encourage girls and women's participation in sport and leadership, programs to encourage social inclusion and social justice, and participation in council programs, for instance, providing guest speakers or coaches for activities. These are important contributions because there are very few organisations in our municipality who are positioned to do this and do this so well. I should note that I actually have the honour of being a coach at the Darebin Falcons in the under-9 girls soccer team. And I would say that I have an interest in this, not from the perspective of being a coach, because I'm not a very good coach, but from the perspective that, as I think every councillor in this chamber would hopefully agree,
10 seconds.
We must raise the rates of women's and girls' participation in sport. It was at 5%, we got it up to about 15%. We need to get to that 40% target, and this partnership will help us do it.
Thank you. Councillor Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Lasserve. I look forward to the day when people in Darebin who are asked, what's your AFL team, who do you support? Don't say Hawthorn, they don't say the Demons, they say Darebin. And that, I think, is where we're heading with this partnership. And for anyone who might think that this is somehow unfair treatment or that somehow we're giving one club something we wouldn't give other clubs, it is true that we are contemplating a funding agreement here that we would not extend to all clubs in Darebin. But I put it to everyone here that clubs that are predominantly male-run have had far more council investment over the last century than the Darebin Falcons will get over the next couple of years as a result of this partnership. And that other AFL clubs that now thrive today and have millions of dollars, no doubt when they were beginning, received bucket loads of council funds and resources. It may have been in the maintenance of their grounds, it may have been in other forms of support that they had. And so what we're proposing here is actually an active measure to even the playing field that has been uneven for far too long. The Darebin Falcons do an extraordinary job in our community. But I think it's also important to note that the funding that's proposed here is not run-of-the-mill everyday funding for a club that isn't managing its finances. On the contrary, this level of support is required because of the very high demands placed by the VFL on participation in elite sports. And the Darebin Falcons will be the only sporting team participating at that high elite level that isn't part of a broader AFL club that has millions of dollars worth of sponsorship deals, pokies revenue for some clubs, and other forms of income. those are the things that critically make this a very different proposal, and I'm delighted to be supporting it, so that next time we see a grand final that everyone's talking about and people say, who do you support? The answer here is the Darebin Falcons.
Thank you. Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Melissa. I'd really like to acknowledge all the Darebin Falcons that are in the audience. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. I'm a very strong feminist, and I've been to some of the Darebin Falcons events, and I think you guys have the most wonderful culture. And for me...
Break your comments through the chair. Sorry.
Yes. So for me, I think the reason that it's important for us to support this motion is because, as Councillor Rady and Councillor McCarthy said, this is a historic chance to invest in female sport in our city. If we don't do this, we're at risk of losing the elite level of this club in Darebin, which I think would be devastating for our community. If you look around this table, we have a female mayor, a female deputy mayor, a female CEO, and 6 councillors out of 9 that are female. And I think this is a real chance for us to really be a very strong female leadership team, showing that we can keep a really, really strong female club, female-led in our city. And I think it's incredibly important because if you think about just what's happened in the last 2 years since AFLW began, that we do have Daisy Pearce, Katie Brennan as household names. It's incredible how far we've come in just 2 years. And I think this is a chance to really, really put the Darebin Falcons on the map, and as Councillor Rennie said, have it as the club that you support if you live in Darebin. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Messina.
This is a unique situation. Every person, notwithstanding their gender, has an equal opportunity to try out and play for any team or any sport. But let's not kid ourselves. Gender inequity in sports exists in facilities, in funding, in media reporting and in prize monies. It's 2018 and we have a government and international bodies such as FIFA incorporating strategic plans for the future of women and girls in sport. It's 2018. Why hasn't this existed before? Sports isn't just physical, it's psychological. There are approximately 3 to 4 times more males that participate in sport today. Generally, men need to win to feel good. Females play sport to feel good and become empowered. Growing up following soccer, cricket and AFL football was a difficult time for me in the 80s. I was called a boy. I was led to believe that there was something wrong with me, that I knew what a no ball was, that I knew what a bouncer was, that I knew what a full forward meant and what 6 points meant and 2 points. But this is now, and when I look at the proposal, I want to see, looking forward, a strategic plan and alongside with the lease option. Like a lease option, there's always an option and a get-out clause. And what this does is give us that get-out clause. And I think it's important moving forward that we have a strategic plan, we have financials, and where we sit and with where we're going to go. What we are committing to is a 2-year deal with a review, an option to assess and then make a further decision. I thought long and hard about this, so I'm very proud to support it. So thank you. Go Collingwood, go Darebin Falcons.
Thank you, Councillor Messina. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Williams.
The Darebin Falcons have been exceptional advocating for girls and women's participation in sport and leadership. They have been proactive on social justice and what inclusion looks like for females. They are a fantastic club empowering Darebin community. Over the years, they have survived and thrived, and I don't want to lose them either. But I have concerns that this report doesn't say whether the Darebin Falcons have made a deliberate, conscious choice not to source funding or accept sponsorship from institutions where available. I thought it's inevitable that every club gets sponsorship and funding. For example, sponsorship doesn't always support pokies like real estate agents. The report doesn't show if any consultation has occurred with other clubs or with the state government, nor does it give details if anyone has made any contact or have approached the AFL or VFL to see if they would come on board to provide funding to prop up the club. Therefore, I'm struggling to see how this council's core position or role to provide funds. I thought council's role was to provide facilities, open spaces and a place for the community to feel safe and to look after the community as a whole. With this proposal, funding is for only one use only, where there are many other clubs that need support that also have female footy clubs that are inclusive and fleeing from family violence. Every club would dearly love to have this handout from their local council. It's an enormous amount of money and it's quite dangerous. It sets a bad precedent and will open the floodgates for investigations. Therefore, I feel the report has not detailed enough for me to give it my full approval tick. I'll have to abstain.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a slight amendment. I have 2 additional points to add to the motion.
Okay,
I sent them through and
we'll
hopefully
bring them
they'll
up on
come
the
up.
screen and then I'll go to the mover and seconder. Okay, so there is the amendments up on screen. I'll give you a moment to read them.
And I'll be seeking a seconder for that amendment.
We'll just see if the mover and seconder accepts it first. Councillor McCarthy?
No.
No.
Okay, that's not accepted. So Councillor Greco will now move that as an amendment. Is there a seconder?
I'll second it.
That's seconded by Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Greco, would you like to speak to the amendment?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Lawrence, for giving me the opportunity to speak to the amendment. Look, I don't want to go over what the other councillors have said. I agree totally with what the views that have been expressed in regards to the Darebin Falcons. I think, as Councillor McCarthy said, it's quite a revolutionary step that we're taking in regards to supporting and funding on an operational basis the Darebin Falcons, and I really welcome that. But the 2 additional points there in my motion, in the amendment, is that we extend that model because I think it's a really innovative model, something that's never been tried before by other councils, where we delve into the operational level of clubs and where we extend that partnership model to other clubs, where we give other clubs an opportunity also to make a submission, not for the sake of making submissions, but we give other clubs an opportunity to make a submission in order to increase the participation rates of girls, women, and also, let's not forget, the participation rates of people from diverse backgrounds who are enormously disadvantaged in participating in clubs, and also particularly to give clubs an opportunity to put in submissions for a partnership agreement with the council in regards to social disadvantage. We have lots of clubs in our city that don't operate at the elite level, but we have clubs that operate more at the community level that provide a great opportunity for people from socially disadvantaged backgrounds to participate in sport. And in Darebin, the participation rates of organised sport is much lower than the state average, and that's the global figure. When you go into that figure and you look at actually who has access to organised sports, you find that people from a socially disadvantaged background or people from diverse backgrounds don't have the same levels of participation rate as do the general community. So this model could actually be extended and provided for other clubs to take up this opportunity. The last point there in the motion is that, again, we need it to be done in an organised fashion, and I acknowledge and respect the Darebin Falcons of putting their case forward, and they've been quite vocal in advocating for their case, and that's been really good. And I think that the last point there, where we call for expressions of interest so that we can assess where we can make some really strong inroads into increasing the participation rates of more disadvantaged groups in our community, or groups that traditionally have not had that level of participation. And finally, I'd like to say is that if we continue on the same way that we have been continuing, we will not increase the participation rates in the marked way that we are proposing to do tonight. If we have this partnership scheme put in place, we could make some really great inroads. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, Madam Mayor. I'm just happy to support this amendment, and I think it's something prudent, this amendment, to consider for good governance. And I, acknowledge the number of councillors who are directly involved in this club and their passion for it, and that's fantastic. But, of course, we've basically been using fees, we've been using the stick to try and increase participation, and it hasn't worked as fast as we want. This brings in the carrot. So I think it's logical that we frame it in a citywide manner and bring a carrot across not just this one code, because obviously there's many other women playing football across the city, but there's other codes of sport, because we're not going to get the participation rates we want unless we apply the carrot across a whole lot of sporting codes.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Are there any further speakers to the amendment?
I have a question, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
I would like to put that over to the officers. How many girls and women's clubs do we have in the City of Darebin?
Ms Henderson? Just one moment.
Through you.
Yes.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. The Darebin Falcons is the only all-women's club that we have. We certainly have other clubs that have sport field women's teams, but Darebin Falcons is the only all-women's one.
Did that answer your question?
No, it did not.
Okay.
So I would like to know...
restate the question again?
Yeah, how many female participation clubs do we have in the City of Darebin?
So how many clubs have women playing for them, I guess is the question, which is a pretty... We might have to take it on notice.
Yeah. Through you, Mayor, I'm afraid we'll have to take that on notice. Thanks.
The reason for my question is...
No, you can't get into a debate. You can ask a question, we can get an answer. You've spoken to the motion.
My question then is, I'm trying to ascertain the funding amount available, the funding amount allocation based on the item number 7 and number 8, and I cannot answer that question with vague and ambiguity.
Councillor Messina, you're getting into a debate against the amendment. You can speak against the amendment. You can stand up now and speak against the amendment if you wish, or you can ask another question, but that was not a question. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Rennie.
Thank you. I'm going to speak against the amendment, although I don't doubt the importance of the sentiment expressed or the desired outcome, which is to increase women's participation, and not just women's participation, but the participation of all underrepresented groups in sport in Darebin. What I think is important here is that adding points 7 and 8 to this motion is not the way in which to achieve that outcome. We have budget submission processes coming up, and I think that in order for us to assess the intent of points 7 and 8 as they've been proposed, we actually need to have them costed, and we need to look at what can be achieved in that way. And I think that's a different discussion. The reason this motion has come before us tonight is because there were significant time constraints on decision making, because the Falcons have to let the VFLW know whether they will be participating by the end of this month. So that meant that this report hasn't come up in the context of a broader discussion, and I think that's important. It is a standalone report, and I don't think we should add things to it. I think we should make this decision on its merits and then get to those other issues that you raise, Councillor Greco. I think it's also important to note that women's participation in the context of the Darebin Falcons is quite different from the participation from other clubs, and particularly we have had so many clubs come to us and say, we need more lights, we need more change rooms, we need more of this and more of that because women are wanting to participate now. And I'm waiting for the club that comes to us and says, we've recognised that women are entitled to participate at equal numbers to men, and because we've recognised that men have been overrepresented and privileged for too long, we've actually reduced the access of men in our club to the sporting fields or the change rooms so that women can participate equally. And the day I have a club come to me and say that, I'll be very much more in favour of adding additional support to what they do.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Are there any further speakers to the amendment? No, I will put the amendment. All those in favour and against? That motion is lost. So we'll go back to the original motion. Okay, are there any further speakers to this motion? Councillor Lawrence?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'll speak in favour of the motion. And And basically, I think the point is taken in that this is a unique opportunity, and I take on goodwill the expression from Councillor Rennie about looking at other clubs to increase women's participation. So I'm happy to support this on the basis of those statements and sentiments said here. It's a pity they aren't added as a motion, an amendment, because when you make an amendment, then things happen. When we just talk, sometimes it's just talk. But it is significant that this club is run by women, and it's significant in an elite program that operates in a male-dominated arena. And we do know that this is a new area, and there's been a lot of enthusiasm from the public for it, but reality and lack of sponsorship are coming into play. So this may be a significant intervention that has a ramification broader than Darebin, actually.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I also will support this motion, as I stated at the outset when I was trying to include an amendment. I think it's really important what's been suggested here is not only that it's going to make a marked difference in ensuring the participation of girls and women in sport, but I think what we're tapping in on here is a model that actually can make a marked and dramatic difference in how we actually ensure that there's gender equity and also possibly in the future more social equity in regards to the participation of underrepresented groups in our city. When I was a young boy, I used to play soccer, and we, as a young boy playing soccer, when we tried to approach clubs, here in the city of Darebin, back then it was called the city of Northcote, we didn't know where to go. We never used to, the clubs were so dominated by particular groups that little kids from ethnic backgrounds just had no show. So we used to play in other parks where we used to knock over all the roses and gardens, and the rangers used to shoo us off. Hopefully, since 40 years ago, hopefully things have improved, but things have not improved. We've seen with women's participation, if we keep with the same formula, things will not improve. We need to make a step difference in relation to really ensuring the participation of underrepresented groups in sport. And again, I just say that I'm excited by what we have before us, because I think not only is the participation of women going to be sustained and increased in the city of Darebin, but I think it's a lesson for I think it's a lesson for us as an administration in how we can step up the participation of underrepresented groups in our city.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Are there any further speakers? No? Councillor McCarthy, would you like the right of reply?
Did anyone speak?
Well, we had someone who abstained, but obviously raised points if you would like to exercise.
I would like to exercise the right of reply if I may, and I thank Councillor Williams for raising the concerns that she did. Having looked at the report and having also heard the submission that was made this evening by the club representative, and obviously hearing about the situation more generally, I think it's really important for us to recognise the reality here and the reality of not acting at this point in time as per the officer report. I would just draw to the attention of all councillors, but also to maybe provide some comfort to Councillor Williams, the consequences that would directly flow if we didn't support this. One of the immediate things that would happen is that the Darebin Falcons would have to notify the VFL that they could not participate and would have to fold as a VFLW club. That's a direct result, and that would happen this month. They would no longer be able to participate in that competition. The elite senior arm of the club would also have to probably move out of Darebin and become the women's component of an existing AFL men's club. There would be no women-run team in the VFL women's competition. This is not me saying that, that's what the report says. The prospect and the concept of this team, this club, having to shift its elite team that has been developed by women over so many years to be run by a club controlled predominantly by men, for me, goes against every concept that we've spoken about in this chamber when it comes to gender equity. So whilst I find it deeply disappointing that we haven't seen the emergence of a golden ticket sponsor who is prepared to bankroll this exercise, and it's an indictment, in fact, on the sponsorship regime that we have. And I hope that there are a whole bunch of commercial and other sponsors that come to the fore that are aligned with the values of the club. We have a responsibility, I think a social responsibility in this case,
10 seconds.
to do what is right. And I think the report provides a pathway that is responsible, is measured, and provides a considerable benefit back to the Darebin community. So I'd just make that point. Thank you.
Okay, we'll close the debate and I'll put that motion to the vote. All those in favour and against? That motion is carried.
If I could, Mayor Lasserf, I'd like to move another procedural motion, which is that we move now to item 9.1 on the agenda, because I'm also conscious there are people here.
Okay, there's a motion to reorder the agenda to consider 9.1. We'll just take a moment for those to leave. Yeah.
I'll second that.
We'll just wait a minute. Okay, there's a motion to reorder the agenda to now consider 9.1. That's moved by Councillor Rennie and seconded by Councillor Lawrence. All those in favour? That motion is carried. 9.1 is response to petition regarding parking restrictions in Queen Street Reservoir. Councillor Williams.
Is it possible that we actually postpone this item? I apologise for those who have come today and those who are watching online.
Yeah.
For reasons being is that we seem to
Hang on, sorry, just a minute. So you want to move a motion to defer this item?
Yes.
So you move that. Is there a seconder to move that? I'm happy for the purpose of this. Okay, so that's Councillor Messina. You can now speak to that motion.
Apologies.
Yeah.
The reason being is that this has been ongoing for several years at Queen Street. We have now another issue where we have the apartments of 24 apartments being built currently at the moment, which will be completed and those will be occupied June 2019. And I think we might be in another situation where we're going to have to go through this whole process again. And I think it's important that we seem to be chopping and changing every year. Something new keeps coming up, a new survey, a new process. I think it's important that we look at something to look at the impact of what those units will be on the street. Also, possibly to look at what houses actually have driveways and what houses actually have double garages. Because we've only done a survey and we haven't actually really looked and done a proper report, I think, that's come to council for us to make this decision tonight. And I don't feel comfortable in making this decision because this is my second term on council and Queen Street, I think, has come up, this is our fourth time that I've been on this council. And yeah, I can see that now when new residents come in, it'll be my fifth time. Like, how many times do we have to do this? I'd like to now do it properly and get it done right and possibly put it off and continue the way things are at the moment. I'm sure it could possibly wait another year until we actually get a better report. I think that'd be more detailed and how this is going to actually impact the residents in Queen Street and not just a survey.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Are there any... Councillor Messina, would you like to speak to the motion now?
I'm going to reserve my right to speak later.
Are there any further speakers to this motion? Councillor?
I have a question if I could.
Yes.
In relation to the survey data, do we have a breakdown to know whether those requesting the removal of parking restrictions come from multi-unit development sites? Does the survey go into that level of detail?
Ms Moxon?
Through you, Mayor Lasserf. We surveyed all residents in the street, including those in apartments. They were given the opportunity to respond to the survey. I would have to take the question on notice to give you the specifics.
Okay. Are there any further speakers to the motion? Councillor Greco.
Yes, Mayor. Look, just very briefly, I agree with the deferment of this report. I'm thankful to the residents that have come tonight and actually shed a bit more light in relation to what the particular circumstances are there. It's not my ward, but I'm very familiar with Queen Street because, as Councillor Williams has said, this has come to the council on a number of occasions where we've looked at the situation. There's the fact of the new development that's going to have an impact. Obviously, there needs to be more attention, and in regards to and more attention. Not only that, but more information given to residents so that they can make an informed decision in relation to the survey. And the other thing that puts into question, and I've raised this on other occasions, is that whilst we have this survey methodology in terms of determining which way we're going to go. Sometimes it's questionable whether a survey methodology in itself can give us the final reason. I think there needs to be a lot more background work, contextual work done, so that when we do get the survey results, we can actually position those in relation to the rest of the information that we have so that we can make a better informed decision. So I commend the motion of deferring this particular report.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Any further speakers? Councillor Messina?
This is a difficult one. And the reason being is most of my comments and questions and emails from residents are about car parking. And unfortunately, we don't have the answers for one particular street. We need to look at our municipality as a whole, and we are implementing a new car parking strategy. And we've just started briefings on that. Do I want to put it off for another year? I don't think the residents want that. I think we need to have a look at debating what's on the table and look at what's happening in the future in terms of a car parking strategy throughout the whole of municipality.
Okay. Are there any further speakers?
Do you have a right
No, you can. Yeah, you can have a right of reply, Councillor Williams.
The car parking strategy is going to take a number of years. I believe the officers were considering on working towards Elphington and Fieldfield first. We could probably ask them to do a priority to maybe do the Oak Hill section first. I don't know if that's a consideration, but I do know, yes, you are correct. We are looking at the new car park strategy, whether residents can hold off for another few months or 6 months. I don't know how long it'll take. Maybe that we could write a letter to the Queen Street residents and see if they would be happy to wait.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Messina? Do you have a question? At this point, we've heard from the right reply. The only thing that we can do now is ask a question or put it to the vote. Okay, I'll put it to the vote.
I have a question. Can I talk about the car parking strategy? Was it highlighted only for the Alphington area or did it include the whole municipality?
Through you.
Through
you, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, so Councillor Messina, we'll take that question. Ms Boxham?
Through you, Mayor Lassurf. The car parking strategy is in train. As part of that strategy, we're doing data collection across the municipality. That data will give us the occupancy rates, how congested, how many cars park in those streets during the daytime and nighttime. That data will then inform a paper coming to council in 2019, suggesting a shift in the way that we manage parking to emphasise an evidence-based approach, and that will come to council in the middle of next year for implementation. In this area, we will pick up that data and we will report back to council as part of that approach.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Okay, I'll put it to the vote. So all those in favour to defer this motion? And that's everybody. So that motion is carried. Okay, move now back to 10.4. Sorry, we're jumping all over the place now. Thank you for coming along this evening. Okay, 10.4, public housing in Rucker Ward. Councillor Lawrence. You'll move that motion?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Yeah, move that motion. I'll speak to it. There's a second.
Yeah, is there a seconder for that motion?
I'm happy to second it for the sake of the debate.
That's seconded by Councillor Greco. Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, Madam Mayor. This is an issue I've spoken about a number of times, which is that in the city of Melbourne, not just Darebin, the greater inner city of Melbourne, we had many industrial sites in the inner city which set the tone of the areas. That has been rapidly rezoned over the last 30 years. And unlike UK and some other places in America, in fact, we haven't taken the opportunity to have any inclusionary zoning to keep some of that land for public housing. In fact, we've had the reverse. Public housing that has been in the city of Darebin has been honeycombed away and eaten away, and we now have even new proposals around including private housing on public housing land. The net effect of that is that there's a lot less public housing in Darebin than people perceive. It is also acutely short in the southern part of the city. These sites I'm proposing here is to look and see if there's some way as a council in a strategic way we can, I suppose, land bank for the poor. What's occurring at the moment with the rezoning, the scheduled rezoning of the Northland precinct is, you'd be surprised to know, for 5 years, people in other countries and other states have been land banking around Northlands where they know that there's a statutory process going underway to make it mixed use from industrial. So much so that local buyers are actually been missing out on land there. So international capital and interstate capital has preserving and getting slices of this rezoned industrial land. And it's time that we push back on this anti-public housing agenda that is reached everywhere. I will remind people there was a public housing budget in the federal government many years ago. Howard knocked it off. And since then, the only person who's put federal money into public housing has been Kevin Rudd, and he put $1.2 billion into Victoria during the stimulus. So it's gone off the agenda, and I think as planners, as strategic planners, we should be trying to leverage and say there's airspace there, there's land there, and I'd recommend to councils, I didn't get to send it to everyone, I did send it to the CEO, who obviously has an interest in the planning area and expertise in the planning area. There are groups identifying lots of lazy land in the inner city, which is service-rich, transport-rich, that could house affordable housing and public housing. So we really want to be part of that debate about the land utilisation for public housing.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Greco?
May I reserve my right to speak?
Are there any further speakers? Councillor Rennie.
Thank you. I commend Councillor Lawrence for his ongoing advocacy about further public housing in the city of Darebin, and I think that is advocacy that we all support, and indeed this council has been working very hard to actually achieve better outcomes and more public housing, particularly on state government land that's currently held in the Walker Street estate and also in the Oakover area. However, we are fighting to get the state government to keep its own land for public housing and make sure they don't sell it off. So the idea of giving them council land somewhat appalls me, because I think the chance of getting the state government to build public housing on our land is probably less than getting them to build public housing on their own land. And imagine if we were to give them land to build public housing, probably we'd find in 5 years' time we were having a battle with them about not selling it for some public-private development. So I think our task here is to continue to advocate and to put as much pressure as we possibly can on the state government to ensure that they build more public housing in the Walker Street estate. I agree, an area with exceptional access to services and schools and everything that you would want for much more public housing. And in fact, the capacity of that site to deliver huge public housing gains is enormous. And the state government does not look as though they're actually moving to achieve that. So I think that's where our investment should be, in that kind of advocacy. At the same time, this council is looking at air rights to our land to achieve social housing outcomes. I know that social housing is not the same as public housing. And if the state government were to come to us tomorrow and say, we will build 100 public housing dwellings if you give us some land, and they would sign that and make sure that was fixed in stone, then I would absolutely entertain that proposal. But with the state government so reluctant to invest public money in public housing, I don't think we should be actually giving away our land.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie.
Just a point of order, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
We're debating this motion, which isn't to consider whether we do it.
What is the point of order?
That the debate we've had is actually in opposition of action, whereas this motion is about gathering facts to make a decision.
But what is your point of order, though? Because...
Oh, well, the point of order is that Councillor Rennie didn't address the motion. She was having a debate that we're not yet ready to have.
Okay.
We haven't gathered the evidence.
Okay, I don't believe it is a point of order. She was speaking to the motion. You might not have liked what she said, but I think that it is within the rules of the debate.
Madam Mayor, I'm sure you've got no idea of my tolerance for liking or disliking things.
We'll move on now. Are there any further speakers to this item? Councillor Greco?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'm going to speak in favour of this motion, principally on the point that we requested a report. There's no definitive decision that has been made here. So we requested a report in order to inform council so that we're in a better position to make decisions in the future. But I also make these other points, Mayor, is that we're talking about public housing. Public housing in the city of Darebin, as we know, as a result of this current government, is actually diminishing because of the proposals that we've been actually advocating against in regards to the sell-off of public land to be used for private development. We have a waiting list of over 35,000 people across the state that are looking for public housing. That won't decrease into the future. It's not something that's going to go down. Actually, with the way that economic policy frameworks are established, that the notion of public housing will be something that will be needed in the future. So that comes to the point about what are we doing now to actually land bank or consider land banking some land that could be used in the future in relation to public housing. I hear the points that were made that the government's not interested in, they won't, because they're currently selling public land. But that's the situation now. These are not decisions that we make in the short term. These are long-term decisions. So I think it's incumbent on the council to try and identify land that could be safeguarded for the future, that when there is a change in government, or there's not so much a change in government, but there's a change in the popular feeling around the issue around public housing, which will come around. These things do come around, that we do have some public land where we can actually house people.
10 seconds.
We often talk about the population diversity in our city, that we want to maintain that population diversity in our city. Unless we keep public land where we can build public housing on it into the future, that's the only way that we'll maintain population diversity in our city.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Councillor Williams, did you want to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you. This was brought to council many years ago, and the report where action was meant to be taken, and there's obviously no action has been taken over these years. It's very disheartening that this council does have an abundance of land that we can free up for social and public housing, and it's important that we look at where we can free up that land. Yes, there's Walker Street, but there's an absolute abundance of social housing in Reservoir area, especially Reservoir East. We have a number of areas that can be freed up, especially in bigger parts of this municipality, and I think we need to look more seriously at this. And it would be welcoming to actually have another report come to council, and hopefully we can start acting on it once and for all.
Thank you. Are there any? Councillor Newton?
Thank you, Melissa. I'd like to speak in opposition to this motion. I think that as Darebin Council and as a local government, we have a role in advocating for more public housing. I'm a very strong advocate of it. I know that the Mayor is speaking at a public housing forum tomorrow. I think that's really important. But I don't think that we should be giving our land to the state government. I think that we've seen, certainly before my time on council and in the time I've been on council, we've seen situations like the Ruthven site, like the Rona Street site, where they were land that the state government didn't need anymore, that council and ratepayers had to pay for effectively a second time. And I think that we've got an opportunity with the pilot site on Town Hall Avenue to be a role model in this space, to increase opportunities to social housing. And I think we need to focus on that and remember that we're an advocate for public housing, but I don't think we should be giving our land to the state government.
Are there any further speakers? Councillor McCarthy.
Thanks, Mayor. I wasn't going to speak against this because I think Councillor Rennie made the critical arguments here, which is that why would we spend time on preparing and producing a report on something that we know the government has no appetite for at the moment and in fact is moving rapidly in the opposite direction. There should be no question about this council's commitment to protecting and increasing public housing in the city of Darebin, across the city of Darebin. We have taken the strongest, most assertive position to protect the Walker Street estate. The forum that's on tomorrow night is co-hosted between Darebin Council and the Darebin Friends of Walker Street Estate, and of course a number of residents. One of the longest serving resident, in fact, at Walker Street, Eileen Artman, actually experienced being there at 40 years. Just a couple of days ago, celebrated 40 years at the Walker Street Estate, the longest tenant of any public housing estate, as I understand it, in the Rucker ward. I want to see Eileen be able to retain her home. I would like council officers to be spending their time doing the wonderful work that they are doing, advocating strongly in every opportunity to protect those existing public housing sites. We have actually done the work, and I would remind Councillor Lawrence of the work that moved through this chamber, which I was very happy to support, investigating the potential for, at that period in time, I think it was social housing above both the Helen Street car park and the car park at Northcote Plaza. I was very happy to support that proposal at the time. We've done the investigative work. It has led to us identifying a range of sites, and one of them we're currently proceeding with a proposal through consultation directly behind us here, and that's because we have managed to leverage some external support to move that forward. So this is not a debate about whether or not the City of Darebin supports and increases the public housing provision in the City of Darebin, whether it's in the north or the south. This is about actually spending our time on the strategic actions that are actually going to make a difference to protect public housing that we have now.
Are there any further speakers? Councillor Lawrence? If there are no further speakers? No. Councillor Lawrence, right of reply.
Yes, Madam Mayor. This motion seeks to inform this council so it can make decisions. It doesn't seek to make a decision. And I think that's been misunderstood by the people around this room, given the tone of the debate. Now, this motion seeks to look at strategic ways on rezoning to preserve land strategically for the expansion of public housing. Public housing around Northlands even has been eroded with sales. It's all been honeycombed away. So we actually need a strategic approach to increase the footprint of public housing. I don't agree with this elitist thing that public housing can only exist where it existed for 60 years. That's a ghetto mentality, and I'm shocked that a progressive council have echoed that. I'm also shocked the state government is eroding that small footprint. I'm talking about us taking a leadership role for this specific amount of public housing we require. Social housing is another solution, we know, but social housing isn't a replacement of public housing. And we're a strategic land planner. We are planning for millionaires and billionaires in Asia to have private flats around Northland. Why can't we be strategically planning to preserve public housing for people who are born and live here?
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. I'll now put that motion to the vote. All those in favour and against? Motion is lost. Next item is 10.5, call for the release of the VPA's confidential draft report on the Preston Market Planning Review.
Mayor, I'll move that motion.
Is there a seconder?
I'll second that, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'm moving this motion because, to put it frank, I'm very disappointed that we're going through a situation once again where things that are associated with the Preston market are held under wraps and held under secrecy. And I cannot help not thinking that this is like another, like as if I'm watching another episode of Yes Minister, where things are sort of wrapped up in committees, wrapped up in consultation, in order to contain them, in order to put them out of sight, out of mind, so that the community does not have the community does not see any transparency in the way decisions are made and what decisions are informed. Let's look at what's happened, councillors. We've had community consultation. The council has actually been a partner in this process with the VPA. We're not bystanders. We're actually a partner in this process. I was sceptical at the outset in relation to, and I made my views known to the CEO, but I said, okay, let's go along. You know, I'm more than prepared to go along and in good faith to go ahead with the VPA and to go through this process of consultation. A community reference group was established. Community was consulted extensively. There were all sorts of activities done in order to get the community's view. Then once that was done, as was mentioned by a member in the chamber earlier tonight, is that there was even no indication that the report that finally got written by the VPA would be a secret report that goes to the minister. And we as a council that are partners in this process, let's underline that. We as a council that are partners in this process are just standing by and allowing that to go through. Now, we have a role. Given that we are partners in this process, we have a role and we should have a say and have the determination to say that the report should be made public. Why is that? Because the community has actually supposedly informed that report, so the community has a right to know what actually is being put forward to the minister. See, at the moment, the community reference group, or the community, apart from us 9 councillors and the administration, we're the only ones that know what's in that report. The community does not know what's in that report. The community does not know what's actually going to be delivered up to the minister, what recommendations have been made to the minister, or actually what information has been included in the report that reflects the community's views and things. Even though that a decision against the community may be made, at least the community should know what has actually been put forward to the community. That's common sense. That's transparency. That's openness. So we need to make a demand as partners in this process that we entered into in goodwill that the report be made public.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, Madam Mayor. As is often mentioned, the Preston market is a privately owned market and it's had different owners over the years, and they extract a very good cash rental from it, because there's a community of small family businesses that run a unique food outlet tailored to our multicultural community. So all these processes that we've been engaging in is to try and reassert the community ownership which is felt and is real over this site. Legalistically, yes, the owners own the site and they have a right to do their own confidential plans and submissions. But this process is about putting the public back into the site, of the future of the site, so we get a site that's successful. And how, you know, it is sort of bizarre, it's like something from Germany, how we get to a point where we're making the consultation from the community secret, so they can't even see their own consultation. It is bizarre. It's something from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or something.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? No? Oh, Councillor Mee.
I think it would be safe to say that we all care about the market and transparency. So, of course, we want this report to be public. And so if it was up to us, it would be. And that's pretty blunt. And as you've heard, as Kim has spoken about before, As Melissa said previously, we're not the responsible authority here. The choice we had was for the councillors to see the report or not to. That was the choice we'd be given. And of course, every single day as a councillor, there's probably 1,000,001 times when I think, if only I could override that decision of state government. I can think of examples in central Preston, I can think of planning examples, I can think of public housing examples. There are so many things I could do if I could control the state government, but we can't. So, of course, we want it released, and I understand the passion of the community. So I would say, advocate to the minister. Advocate to the minister. You don't need us to do this. If we had the power, it would already be happening, which makes it very clear we don't have the power. So we don't need this motion here. I would strongly support the community going forward, talking to the BPA, talking to the minister. If you want to see the report, then tell them.
Are there any further... So I'm sorry, but...
We can try!
Councillor Amir, maybe you should just take a time out for a minute if you need to calm down. But if the gallery could observe the silence, which is required within the local law, the meeting procedures. Are there any further speakers to this motion? Councillor McCarthy.
Look, I'll speak against this, and I do so because I actually want to correct something that was that's been raised in the order of debate. And that is a comment made by Councillor Lawrence, which is that this report is the culmination of the consultation. I would refer councillors back to what the motion actually says. Okay. And the motion is very clear. The motion refers to the confidential draft recommendation report. It's a recommendation report by the VPA, which is an organisation, a body that reports directly to the minister. And I would say 99% of the, and in fact probably even more, 99.9% of the recommendations that it provides to the minister are never shown to organisations such as Darebin Council or other responsible authorities in the mix. It is actually a very rare thing that this council, under very strict confidentiality, had the opportunity to see what was in that report. It is also the reality that if this motion was to be put forward, I think every councillor I'd like to think could actually predict what the response is going to be. So I think councillors need to be realistic about the expectations that they're creating in the community, because the premise, the very idea that the minister and the VPA would release their report before the minister has actually considered it, which goes against every single process that the minister currently has in place. It sounds great as a motion, but it is not only unrealistic, it is actually unfair on the community to raise expectations that this could even happen. And I would ask councillors to think seriously about the expectations that they are creating that are unrealistic, that are highly unlikely, and are ultimately, I think, unfair. The politics happens here and it happens in the community, but let's do the politics well, not do things which we know we're going to get an obvious no to.
Are there any further speakers? No? Councillor Greco, would you like the right of reply?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Look, I just make the point that if councillors vote against this motion, let's be clear, councillors, we're voting for secrecy. We all know that the government has its processes, has its procedures, makes decisions that are beyond the council, but that's never stopped us, councillors, from advocating it. We could go back to all the council meetings. How many motions have we put forward to advocate on various issues that we know that are beyond our control? That's what's expected of us as councillors. That's what the community expects of us. We're not raising expectations here, as Councillor McCarthy is suggesting. The community wants to know what's in the report that's going to the minister. That's all they want to know, because the community has been taken on a journey, which I would consider being taken on a ride, in providing information, and then we don't know what actually is going. It's just a fundamental, logical step that needs to be taken. And again, I would reiterate that it's a classic case of Yes Minister, where things just get locked up in processes, procedures. The whole construct of this Preston Market consultation process has been a way of containing, concealing, and also a way of managing a particular outcome. I'm very firm about that. And I know I'm making a strong statement, but that's what is being orchestrated here by the VPA. And unfortunately, as a council, we're being taken on a ride with the VPA in regards to this process. The community was expecting the council to take a firm decision about Preston Market, and we're reneged on that. And that's bad for the council.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. I'll now put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? All those in favour? Sorry, hang on. Let's start again. Councillor Greco didn't hear me. Okay. All those in favour? And against? Motion is carried. Oh, hang on. Did you vote? I'm confused now. Did you vote for or against? Against. Oh, no. So the motion is, because Councillor Amir is not here. So the motion is tied, and I'll use my casting vote to support the motion. Moving now to item 10.6, request for permanent maximum mandatory heights over existing footprint of the Preston Market.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move this motion.
Is there a seconder? That's been seconded by Councillor Williams. Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Williams. Look, I'm moving this motion in relation to extending the free exercise in the park program. And
hang on. Back. Sorry. 10.6.
Oh, sorry.
I'm
ahead of myself.
We'll reset the... So hang on, I'll just check with Councillor Williams. You are seconding this motion? Yep, okay.
Okay.
We'll reset the clock and we'll start
I apologise, councillors. I'm a bit ahead of myself here.
Okay.
This motion is in relation to the maximum mandatory heights for the existing footprint of the market. Why I'm moving this motion, councillors, at the moment, as you councillors will be aware, the Minister has put in place temporary height limits for the market, which is 9 feet. And at the moment, that's what stands. That was done through a directive of the Minister, basically by just signing a letter and placing those temporary mandatory heights on the Preston Market. Why that was done? Because the general feeling is that the market, to be a market, in a sense, the market needs to be an open air market. So those temporary heights were put in place in order to assure that. But when you go into the detail, the temporary heights are only valid, will expire early next year, I believe. And as a result of that, then we don't know what course they're going to take. In the consultations that I've been involved in and what I've heard from the community, and I've sat in many consultations and talked to many traders and many community members, the essence of the market is that the market needs to be an open air market. That's a no-brainer. If you're going to have a market, it needs to be an open air market. And the other thing that's come across strongly from the community is that the people want to see that the existing market remain because of historic, cultural and heritage significance and value. So given that we're on the eve of a state election, I think it's important that the Minister, given that the Minister's taken a massive interest in the market, that permanent controls be placed on the market in order to ensure that the mandatory heights on the footprint of the market remain 9 feet. Like that, we can guarantee into the future that the market will be, which is one of its central characteristics, an open air market.
Thank you. Councillor Williams?
Happy to...
Okay, are there any further speakers? No further speakers? Councillor Williams, would you like to speak?
Yep. I'm happy to actually second this motion because I believe that this notice of motion is only temporary. It's intermittent for controls until further controls, which will be mandatory.
Okay. If there are no further speakers, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And against? Motion is carried. We'll move now on to item 10.7, extend free exercise in the park program to public housing estates.
So we're back on track? Yeah?
Yep,
yeah, okay.
We're back to this one. And that's seconded by Councillor Williams. Councillor Greco.
Okay, thank you. Again, this is in relation to the free exercise in the park program. This is a program, actually I'm quite proud to say that this is a program that maybe over 6 or 7 years ago that I introduced into the chamber, and it's a program that's actually taken off, and it's proven to be quite relevant and quite successful from all the reports that I've had. The original impetus for having this free exercise in the park program was part of our community health strategy in order to assist people who are perhaps socially disadvantaged to actually participate in health programs that otherwise they couldn't for reasons that they maybe could not afford to attend the gymnasium or be or go or pay for swimming lessons or whatever it may be that would require a financial commitment. So we initiated this free exercise in the park program at a very, very minimal cost, I remember, and actually I think that the cost has now been absorbed and it's very minimal because it uses existing staff that are part of our leisure centres. What this motion does is that in order to keep in line with the initial principle of why we introduced this free exercise in the park program was to reach out to people who are perhaps socially disadvantaged or in financial hardship. They can't afford to attend paid classes. So what I'm suggesting here is that we extend the program to public housing estates. We know that people that live in public housing estates, many of them are on fixed incomes, either pensioners or on social security benefits, and do not have the luxury that working people have in joining a gym and joining a program and participating in health programs. I think we could easily do this. It'll be at a very minimal cost. The system is already in place. It's just a question of outreaching to the public housing estates. And we have quite a few public housing estates in our city, and whilst at the same time maintaining the existing program of the rotating parks where we have these free exercise programs. So pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Extend it's a proven formula. Let's extend it so that we can make an outreach to more deserving people.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Councillor Williams.
This will help people in the community to participate in sport where otherwise they will not be able to, maybe due to financial, social or transport accessibility. I think it's important that this council has a role in this particular type of business because I think it's important that Darebin show that we're more inclusive, especially that those who are isolated in their homes, that a little step might be a big step for others, and I think it's important that we can try and include as many of those vulnerable people to be getting free access for exercise, because mental health is a big concern for people in Darebin. It affects 1 in 3 people.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Rennie.
For you, Mayor Le Cerf, I have a question for Ms Henderson.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And the question is the timeline in relation to November viable and achievable for council officers?
Ms Henderson?
Through you, Mayor Le Cerf, if it was to go to the November 7th meeting of council, it gives us, I think, about 3 days to do the report. If it went to the December meeting of council, councillors would receive it in November, and that's what we'd do if this motion was passed.
Okay, does that clarify?
I'm wondering if a more comprehensive piece of work might be enabled by further time.
So hang on. You're entering into a bit of a
My
debate
second
there.
question is, if there were a couple more months, would council be able to contemplate a more complete piece of work?
Ms Henderson.
Through you, Mayor Le Cerf, I think that if the report went to December council with councillors receiving it in late November, that there'd be information of value in the report.
Thank you very much. And I do have an amendment to propose. The amendment would be that council receive a report in November on options to increase participation in the free exercise in the park program by residents of public and social housing estates. Would you like me to read that again more slowly? that Council receives a report in November on options to increase participation in the free exercise in the park program by residents of public and social housing estates.
Okay, we'll just wait for the words to be up on screen. If you've got them written down, could you pass them up? To report in November. Could you...
Just have to write them.
Oh, you haven't written them? Oh, okay. Hang on, we'll just try and work that in. Yeah. Hang on, we'll just get them up on the screen first.
Could I also propose a change to December?
Hang on. So this. The Council receives a report in December on options to increase participation in the free exercise in the park program by residents of public and social housing estates in Darebin. Councillor Greco, do you...
Can I just have a question in relation to the December? When in December would that be? I would hope that would be early December. Is that the case?
We haven't set our meeting dates for December.
I just need to get an understanding of that.
But it is proposed for the 3rd of December.
3rd of December. If it's the 3rd of December, I'm happy to accept that.
Okay. And Councillor Williams? Yes. Okay, so we'll incorporate that into the motion, and that now becomes a substantive motion. Are there any further speakers to the motion? Councillor Lawrence?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Yeah, look, I commend this motion. One of the things I suppose we have to acknowledge in Australia increasingly, we live in a class-based society, or hourglass society in Darebin. I remember experiencing it in Fitzroy 20, 30 years ago, and now it's occurring here. So what happens there is that those groups with more social capital capture services, which we've seen in childcare, etc. So this idea to actually locate on the housing estates, to me, is very exciting. Those of you who may have had the opportunity to go into the walk-up flats in East Reservoir mightn't realise that there's no open space in those buildings, and there's families living in two-storey buildings. They're surrounded by undeveloped land. And so this kind of program going into those areas, they're actually low density. A lot of our public housing is lower density than the private. And activating those spaces would obviously put exercise right in front of families there, many migrant families, refugee families, and also promote safety there. And I have seen it work well in Arthurton Gardens in Fitzroy.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? No? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Next item is 10.8, new library for the north-east side of Reservoir.
I'll move that motion, Mayor.
Happy to second that.
Seconded by Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Greco?
Thanks, Mayor. Look, the motion is quite explanatory, and I'd like to underline the point that we're seeking a report here. We're not making a decision because we are only seeking a report. The reason why I've put this motion is that library services are a very much loved service in our community. We've seen in the 4 or 5 years ago when the state government was trying to cut down library service, there was a massive resistance against that, and actually as a result of that we increased our funding. The reason of requesting a report on the feasibility of establishing a new library outlet, particularly in the northern part of our city, is that for a number of reasons. One is that there's been a population increase, as we know, in the northern end of our city. We're going to see that also increasing into the future. Also, we have already in the south of our city where we have the Northcote Library, and within about a kilometre away from the Northcote Library we have the Fairfield Library, which is like a smaller outlet of the Northcote Library, and it's a great service, a great facility. I grew up around that area, and often when I was a young boy I made use of the Fairfield Library and both the Northcote Library. And and with population density, decentralising some of these library services, I think, is a good thing. The other reason why I think we should investigate seriously the possibility of having a library outlet in the northern end of our city, and I suggest there, and the only suggestions, it could be Keon Park, which is a new, vibrant, growing area, or the Kingsbury precinct, is that there is a deficit. There's a clear deficit in the northern end of the community in relation to community infrastructure and community assets. And the other point that I would make, and this came out of a report many years ago that was sponsored by the council in relation to alternatives to gambling, which was prepared by the council in regards to, particularly in relation to communities from different ethnic backgrounds. And we know that 70% of our losses in relation to gaming machines is in the northern part of our city. And part of the reason that there's no silver bullet in relation to poker machines, but one of the things that came out of that report, I remember distinctly, was the need for alternatives. There was a need for people to go to different places where they could spend a day or spend an afternoon, and where they could walk into and spend their time and spend their recreational time. And I think if we really want to build the infrastructure and an alternative infrastructure to gambling in the northern part of our city, I think this will be one of the good options to pursue, apart from all the various other reasons that I have given. So I ask councillors to consider this. We'll get a report together, and then that report will help us in our deliberations in relation to the upcoming budget.
Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, Madam Mayor. This is a very exciting proposal that's been put up by Councillor Greco, and I suppose, you know, it speaks to the heart of providing infrastructure where population growth is occurring. We've actually adopted, the previous council adopted quite aggressive...
Sorry, Councillor Rennie and Councillor McCarthy, you're being very loud there.
Quite aggressive development proposals along Plenty Road. We haven't seen them being built yet. There's been a few, but many more will come. So you're looking at quite a big population increase there. And we've also seen council withdraw from Northlands as a service provider. So there's some interesting opportunities, I suppose, to do some strategic planning around something like a library in this area, which is geographically isolated because of the green spaces and creeks, but is actually going to grow, and maybe even there'll be some opportunity for some service provision from a library, from a branch library, which I know occurs. I'm heartened to see finally, you know, North Fitzroy Library fixed, and I remember doing petitions about that 35 years ago. So sometimes councils take a long time to move, but we should start moving.
Thank you. Councillor Messina. Just so you know, we're going to, sometimes that's working and sometimes it's not. We're doing it here as well, so I'll warn you when you have 20 seconds to go, okay?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I have a question. Council is formulating a lifelong learning strategy. I'm just wondering, when that report is due, and number two, will that identify a needs analysis based on evidence bases where we are needing libraries throughout the whole of the municipality?
Ms Henderson?
Meeting tomorrow night.
Through you, Mayor Lassurf, there's a number of sort of projects and planning work going on which is looking at areas of growth, benchmarking library catchments against standards and looking at where it might be needed to increase library facilities, but the lifelong learning strategy isn't one of them.
So I guess a follow-up would be, when would we receive that work that isn't the lifelong learning strategy but would give us the information in relation to this?
Mayor Lassurf, it'll be coming in part in the consideration of when the 10-year capital works plan draft comes to council. It'll be something to be considered then, but we certainly won't have all those answers later this year or early next year. There's a lot of work to be done on considering the long-term future as well as existing needs.
Okay. Did you have your hand up, Councillor McCarthy?
Proposed amendment to the motion. I'd propose to the mover and seconder to delete the words "in December," so not to restrict when the report comes to us, but actually to allow the work to happen to get the report right. So to remove the words "in December."
Look, I'm not prepared to accept that because that leaves it in the Never Never Land.
Okay, that's not accepted. Do you want to move that as an amendment?
No, that's fine. I'll deal with the debate.
Are there any further speakers? We've heard from the mover and seconder. Councillor Rennie, hang on just a moment. Okay.
Thank you. I think it would be fair to say that I'm one of this council's greatest champions of libraries and have not just been a huge advocate for them, but have actually worked very hard to improve and be innovative in the way libraries are delivered, and that's included writing a grant application in my other day job, which has brought $300,000 into libraries in Melbourne's northern suburbs. However, I don't believe that asking for a report with these kind of timelines is a helpful way to think about planning for the future of libraries in our municipality. I think we need to do more work with neighbouring municipalities. I think we need to think about the role that libraries play generally, and that work, I think, will occur best in the context of broader pieces of work that look at the infrastructure needs within Darebin, and notably the massive piece of work that's being done currently about future infrastructure needs in the municipality through the work that's going on for the Development Contributions Plan, which is going to set a standard for what are the sorts of services and infrastructure that our community is going to require in the future, given the growth, and how are those going to be funded. That's the appropriate place for this. But I think that also asking for a report into a new library in this location might miss other possibilities, which might include thinking about mobile libraries, pop-up libraries, and other ways to actually make sure that library services are most available and accessible to people who least use them. I mentioned other municipalities because I think it's worth noting that there are libraries in Thomastown, Mill Park and Watsonia, all of which are available to Darebin residents, just as our libraries are available to residents of other municipalities. So whilst we all support libraries, I think there's a time and a place for doing the work that actually plans infrastructure, and passing motions like this raises community expectations, but also suggests doing things in isolation, and that's not the best way to get infrastructure built.
Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Mayor Surf. I'd like to speak in opposition to this motion. I'm also very much a library advocate. I'm a former librarian and still a qualified librarian. But for me, I think the key thing here is that we are doing longer term strategic work, as the officers said. And for me, I think this has to form part of a wider strategy about what our city needs in all sorts of ways in terms of capital works. We spend a lot of money on things like pools, libraries, etc. And there is a library not far north in Thomastown. So I just think skewing it, having a notice of motion that says that we should look at whether a library should be in Keon Park or Kingsbury, I just think I'd like to see a more strategic view of the whole municipality and the forecast of populations and where a library might best be needed, or as Councillor Rennie said, also what the future of libraries might be, and it might not be a physical location. Thanks.
Councillor Messina. Hang on.
I'm going to go...
Yep.
I'd like to go back to my statement a few motions ago, and using funds for wasteful master plans, using funds for wasteful reports, I think it's not the best way to go. We do need that long strategic plan. We need to undertake an evidence base and a needs analysis based on the whole of the municipality to ascertain what's missing. I mean, if I was to wave my magic wand and put in a notice of motion, I'd like to see a man-made beach at the back of Darebin. I want to see a watermark equivalent of a swimming centre on the TW Blake Reserve. I want to see a graffiti-free management plan through the municipality. I want a huge amphitheatre on Ruthin Reserve. And I'd like Collingwood to win the grand final, but sadly that 2-2 is not going to work. Again, I think we need to do a needs analysis on the basis of a 10-year strategic plan and not use resources and wasteful reports on something that's intermediately.
Are there any further speakers? No? Councillor Greco, would you like to exercise your right of reply?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I thank the contribution that the various councillors have made, but I just can't help not thinking that notwithstanding all the good intentions and the goodwill of councillors, what comes across to me is really a wishy-washy explanations in terms of either leaving this into the never land, locking this up into some 10-year plan, which I've got nothing against. That we'll be going through that work. But what we're talking about here is putting forward a realistic, not an unrealistic proposal. It's putting forward a realistic proposal and looking at what opportunities there are in order to increase the infrastructure in the northern end of our city. We talked earlier on how the council plan, from my perspective, I think it's skewed more towards to the south, and that this is an opportunity to actually balance that council plan. We need to also say that library services, yes, we could have pop-up libraries, we could have mobile libraries. I'm all for that. Let's do that. Not a problem about that sort of thing, and I welcome that. But what I'm talking about here in relation to this is that we actually seriously look at establishing a place, an offshoot of the Preston Library there in the northern part of the city. We've got one in Fairfield. People are quite excited about our library in Fairfield. I just don't see why we should not have one in the northern end of our city. If it's good enough for Northcote and Fairfield to have a couple of libraries, why isn't it not good enough for the northern end of our city to have one? And instead we have these convoluted arguments of putting it into the future and wishy-washy type statements that are made by. It always seems to me that when it comes to the crunch about doing something, and it's not just here about raising communities' expectations over the top. This is what we're elected to do, councillors. We're elected to put forward proposals, get reports back from our officers, and then to carry those through and work those through and to make those things as realistic as possible. So I hope councillors have a rethink and that we can get some work done in relation to a library in the northern end of our city.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Yep, you can ask a question. Councillor Williams.
Just to the officers, I know we have a strategy plan that with population growth that you have to be so many metres to open space. Is there anything regarding libraries as such? I mean, Reservoir is considered a huge area.
Okay, hang on. You can ask a question.
Yeah.
You've asked a question, so we'll get a response. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Lassurf. There are benchmarks available that are recognised, that are adopted throughout the library profession, which indicate a number of floor space per square metres per population. So the benchmarks are calculated on the population of the municipality and then calculate a floor space allocation, not the number of libraries per se. So you could have one really big library meeting the needs of or individual ones, but we can refer to those benchmarks for guidance. Thank you.
Okay, we've heard from the right of reply from the mover, so I'll now have to put that to the vote. All those in favour? And against? Motion is lost. Okay, now we're moving back to item 8.1 in consideration of reports. Annual Report 2017-18. That is moved by Councillor McCarthy, seconded by Councillor Rennie. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have to get back to the agenda for just a moment. So this item is essentially tabling our council's annual report, which, as councillors would know from the report, has to be tabled within a month of being submitted to the Minister. It has been a very busy year, and despite all the conversation in the chamber about things coming ahead, there's been an extraordinary amount achieved in the past 12 months. I just want to draw a couple of those items to councillors' attention, some of the highlights in the past 12 months. The single-use plastic-free events policy was adopted in February this year. Climate Emergency Advisory Committee was appointed in April and comprises a wide range of... sorry, Mayor, I'm hearing a lot of chatter in the gallery, and I ask that I could be heard in silence.
Yeah, if the gallery could remain silent during the debate. Okay,
there's been 10 solar installations in businesses facilitated by council, including the largest in Darebin of 400 kilowatts. That is a significant installation. An additional 1,100 trees were planted in parks, bushland areas. In total, the number of trees was 3,000. For councillors who've looked through the table and can see some of those benchmarks that council also set, the achievements have been significant. We often hear columnists like John Mesanauskas in the Herald Sun and Andrew Bolt having a crack at local government, saying they should focus on collecting the rubbish. Well, I'm proud to say that in the City of Darebin in the last 12 months, we exceeded the benchmark of 99.9% of the bins were collected. We actually ran out of figures in the column. So I think we're smashing that one. 6 vacant shops were reactivated through the Active Spaces program. 727 new businesses were registered in the City of Darebin, which exceeds our target as well. 4 road safety projects were undertaken, and 3 precincts were transformed into 40-kilometre zones, making them much safer, particularly for our vulnerable road users, pedestrians, cyclists, and particularly our ageing community as well. Those are some of the stats that we set out, or some of the benchmarks we set out to achieve. But these are the higher order aspirations amidst a whole range of work over 100 council services that take place across the year. So I just wanted to note those points because I think it's very easy to miss the fact that in every one of those areas we have actually either achieved or exceeded the target. And I want to say thank you to all the council staff and volunteers and people involved in council's operations. A significant number of our council staff live in the City of Darebin, and I want to acknowledge those people as well who see it firsthand and do the work firsthand as well. So a big thank you to the council workers from every level of the organisation for an extraordinary year and some great achievements.
Thank you. Councillor Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Lasserf. I would like to echo Councillor McCarthy's thanks to the council officers who have made this report possible and whose work I think is reflected so well in the report and that I think we as council can actually be very proud of. I trusted that Councillor McCarthy would do a great job describing some of the services, so I thought I might maybe be less exciting and actually talk a little bit about the financial side of things. Because we've talked tonight a lot about infrastructure and we've talked about our aged care services, we've talked about lots of things that we do. So I thought it's worth noting that for every $100 of council expenditure, $27.57 is allocated to capital works. That is our single largest item of expenditure, and that's the money we use to upgrade the sporting pavilions and to make sure that council facilities are top-notch. The second largest area of expenditure is aged services, $10.79 of each $100. And worth noting also that that's a commitment that we've made to our community to maintain the $6 million of council funds that go into ensuring that older people in our community can live well. And the third most significant area of expenditure is waste management. And that is picking up those bins and providing such an extraordinary level of service to our community. These are the things that make a day-to-day difference in people's lives. But we also know that libraries are right up there and they account for $4.47 of every $100 spent. And the quality of the roads people drive on, the arts facilities and the cultural events that they attend, the parks and gardens that they use. All of these things council does with fairly limited and constrained resources, and I think we do an amazing job. And once again, I commend the report to you and thank the staff for their work.
Councillor Messina.
I just want to echo Councillor Rennie and Councillor McCarthy's points, but I also want to highlight a few things in the report. The first thing is goal number 1 under target 1 kilogram reduction of waste. We've actually resulted at 12.6 reduction of waste during this council plan. When I first set out to nominate for council, the first thing I did was obtain the council report, and I sat on a plane and I read it, and I thought there's a lot more things I could probably be reading, but I actually did just before I nominated. But I wanted to highlight a few more other sentiments during the report, and that is the awards that we've won here at Darebin, and that's Indigenous Trainee of the Award, Jemima Potter, the 4 Green Room Awards by Darebin Arts Speak, the Paul Jerome Award awarded to the Darebin CEO, Sue Wilkinson. I also want to point out that I've just read recently that the Darebin is also a finalist in the Darebin Cultural and Creative Infrastructure Framework, named as a finalist by the Planning Institute of Australia. So we will look forward to that and see how that, hopefully they win. I also want to point out advocacy for better public transport, the big action plan number 4, establishment a new Darebin Nature Trust. Also want to point out what else we did. Reinvigorate the Darebin Arts Centre, big action plan number 10 under goal number 3. Under goal number 13, develop a development contribution scheme, which is a little bit behind that I'd like to anticipate, but I look forward to that coming through. And also action plan number 16, developing a plan for the revitalisation of Central Preston, which I can tell you that on this Saturday, we have a Future for Preston Summit. So I hope you all can come along and give us your input. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Messina. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I just want to reiterate what the other councillors have said in terms of the effort that's been put in the last financial year in regards to the financial results that we've achieved. And the report not only talks about financial results, which are important, but also about all the other achievements in the that the council's undertaken, particularly some of the social programs that we've funded and the other activities that the council has promoted. Just from a financial perspective, I think it's fair to say that that we have a very healthy balance sheet, and also that we have a very healthy profit and loss statement. We have a strong surplus that we've made the last financial year, which is added to our balance sheet, and I believe that it's a $1.5 billion assets that we have in our city. That's on the plus side, but I think it would be remiss of me not to mention some of the things that I think we need to pay particular attention for future years. One is our capital works program. Yes, we're trying to do a lot in relation to our capital works, so I think we need to invest more in that. I'm not convinced of the argument that we only have limited capacity. We could always buy that capacity if we wanted to actually increase the capital works output of the city. We had, I believe, a 14% carryover in relation to our capital works program from the last into the next financial year. So we really need to improve on that. And look, and I say that with with the understanding that this year has been a year of consolidation. There's been lots of changes in the council, new officers, new administration. I think everyone's really charged up, ready to go, and to really put in for the next year. The only other point that I would make is in relation to consultants' fees. I note that they've increased from 1.4 million to 2.4 million. That's a $2 million increase in consultants' fees. I think that's something that we really need to look at and really to get, keep under control and bring it down to way down to what it has been in the past.
Thank you. Are there further speakers? No, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Moving now to item 8.2, Streets for People Program Corridors 1 and 2.
I'll move that, Mayor. With an amendment? Oh, no. An alternate motion? What's the amendment?
So Councillor Greco was moving the motion, not the motion, the recommendation?
Yeah, it's just an additional. Actually, point number 2 is slightly changed.
So was this the one circulated or is it different? Yep, okay. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Williams. Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'm really pleased to move this motion in relation to the Streets for People program. This is quite an exciting program, and it's a very comprehensive program. that the council is embarking on, and together with some of the support from the state government. There's a sort of matching money that's coming from the state government in relation to this particular program. The report's quite self-explanatory. There's also in the report, there's apart from the council report, there's also attached a report in regards to the Northcote Thornbury corridor, which has been specifically addressed in this particular recommendation. That's the proposal that we're moving ahead with in relation to taking it to the next phase and investing our money in ensuring that part of the program gets implemented. In relation to the small adjustment that I've made to the motion, is that when you look at where this program is going to be rolled out, and the program initially was going to be rolled out in obviously the Northcote Thornbury corridor, where the money's been as a result of it directly been allocated for that. But the future program was only in relation to Gower Street and Kramer Street. And what I've added in there, thoroughly looking at the report, is to include the Northcote Reservoir corridor. And if you look at page 261, councillors, the Northcote Reservoir corridor, there's the recommendations are generally easy to implement. That's what's stated in the report. And that managing crossings of High Street and rail line and of Cheddar Road, and that it's identified as a high opportunity street for greening. So I thought that councillors, it would be good for us to also include, in order to make this a holistic approach that goes right across the city, both from the southern end to the central part of the city and also to the northern end, where I believe that there's going to be increasing demand for cyclists, and so therefore we need to improve the infrastructure in relation to people in the northern end of the city. And I think like this, we can get something happening immediately in Northcote and get some sort of consultation and feasibility studies happening both for the Preston area and also for the reservoir area, so that we can move as one across the city. Often what is said with these types of projects is that sometimes you have to provide the infrastructure in order to get the people to use it. It's sort of a bit of a catch-22 in that sense. So I believe that in order for have a bit of equity across the city, let's go ahead with because it's well advanced, the Northcote Thornbury proposal, but let's look at investigating both the Gower Street and Kramer Street together with the Northcote Reservoir corridor.
Councillor Williams.
Council recognises that the public realm and streets are very precious here in Darebin. We are a very growing and changing city. As we're growing and changing, it's important that we continue to define what our streets will look like in the future. I'm very pleased to see things like prioritising road safety and reducing vehicle speeds and improve our driver behaviour, develop high quality places for people for walking and cycling, and most of all, to develop functional and inviting streetscapes for all, especially those who work, live and play in the area. Other than that, I have nothing else further to say, because I think it's been a long night for most of us, and I think the sooner we move on, the better.
Thank you. Further speakers? Councillor Rennie. Oh. Yep.
Thank you. I'm going to be voting against this motion, but foreshadow that I will be moving another motion if this motion doesn't succeed, and the other motion will be the motion as per the officer's report. I think it would be fair to say this is a program that we all love and we want to see more of. But officers have recommended a second stage Gower Street and Kramer Street project, and they've done that because of a number of factors, including community readiness, ability to do the work in 1 year, and priorities. And it's my understanding, having been to the briefing on the Streets for People project, that the next, that if we were to do a project in Reservoir, the highest priority project would probably be Corridor 7, which is Reservoir Station to the University Link, and that's the station that has the greatest potential right now to actually attract more cyclists. However, this is not a good time to do that because of the uncertainty and the chaos that's going to be created by the level crossing removal. And so just choosing another project in Reservoir actually isn't good practice. The Northern Link is not one where there's an appropriate level of community readiness at the moment, and I think that what we want to do is actually do these projects where there's community readiness to use the infrastructure and where the community support for these changes is going to be greatest. And that's why I really look forward to when we're in a position to do the work on the Reservoir Station to Unilink as soon as the level crossing removal project is a little bit further along. And I think that'll be the time to do the consultation and to really capitalise on the significant improvements in accessibility and journeys that will actually come from that. So for that reason, I'm not supporting this and do foreshadow another motion.
Are there any further speakers? Councillor McCarthy.
Look, I'd just state for very similar reasons to Councillor Rennie, I'd also support the substantive motion, the one listed in the agenda, and that's because I did attend the workshop that was convened and available for councillors to attend to understand the complexity of this work. This is not an easy process, and in fact, as you would see from the report, there is a lot of deep community consultation, navigating complex issues. There is a set of priorities that have been identified. If councillors want to massively and rapidly expand the size of our transport planning team, I will fully support that, because that is actually what this requires. Is to do more than one project at a time is actually a significant impost on officer time. And as the person that actually brought this proposal to council now about 8 years ago, I'm over the moon that this is on the table, but I do not want to see us jeopardise the good planning that Councillor Rennie has outlined is required, the community readiness, but also the support of other partners. And that's why the report, as it outlines at the moment, actually prioritises particular projects and actually says other ones are actually going to be appropriate further down the track. So councillors need to really consider what reports actually say, what the evidence supports, rather than just picking something off the map. And I feel that that's what this amendment or amended version of the motion actually proposes. I don't think it's good governance. I don't think it's how we should do this sort of process, particularly when so much community involvement is so necessary in these sorts of processes.
Councillor Lawrence.
I speak in favour of the motion.
Yes, we'll hear from you.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Again, I have been in a happy situation with 55% of the capital works going on in Latrobe Ward in the past. Not this council, though. This council tonight, we've heard, if they want a library, they better go to Thomastown. If they want this streets program, they better move into Northcote. That's what we've been telling Reservoir residents tonight. Go elsewhere. And it's ridiculous. If we can't do 3 projects, I really wonder about competency.
Are there any further speakers? No? Okay, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Oh, sorry, yes, sorry, you're right, Councillor Greco. I'm sorry about that.
That's all right. Thank you, Mayor. I know it's late. Look, I've heard the arguments for and again, the arguments against, and again, I'm not convinced. The arguments against are fairly flimsy. The arguments against are always trying to put projects that we could do in the northern part of our city, always back on the back burner in the never land, and I'm really disappointed about that. I mean, constantly there's a constant thing, and that's why I look at these reports and I say, okay, what's in these reports for the northern end of our city, and what can we practically do to start to progress also activities and projects in the northern end of our city. We're not asking here to build something in the northern end of our city. We're asking here to do some of the preliminary planning in the northern end of our city. We're not taking away from the southern end of our city or from the Preston end of our city. We're leaving that as it is, but we're saying also let's consider the northern end of our city and let's do some preparatory work in relation to that. And I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time in relation to these projects. So I'm really disappointed to hear councillors again just trying to fob this these types of projects off and put the and not have a sense of capital equity across our city. I don't think we could just sit back and wait as second best all the time and wait for projects and wait for the wave of projects to finally make their way up to the north. And I don't think that's the way to go. You know, why couldn't it be in projects like this that you start from the other end. And you work yourself down south. Why can't it be like that? And the thing about community readiness, who's to say that the community is not ready in the northern end of our city? Where did those statements come from?
Time. Thank you, Councillor Greco. I'll now put that to the vote. All those in favour and against, motion is carried. Next item is 8.4, recycling promotion. Oh, hang on. Sorry, before anyone moves a motion, can I ask somebody to extend the council meeting by 30 minutes to 10:30? So that's moved by Councillor Williams, seconded by Councillor Greco. All those in favour? And against? Motion is carried. Okay. Next item is 8.4, recycling promotion. Is there a mover of a motion for this?
I'm happy to move it.
Anyone?
Mayor, I'm happy to move it.
Thank you, Councillor
And I have a
Greco.
slight amendment in relation to this one again.
Okay, we'll bring that up on the screen. Okay, there is the motion that Councillor Greco is moving. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Messina. Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor. I know that it's very late, and look, I think this is a very good report, and I'm glad that we're initiating a recycling promotion. As we know, there's been a bit of confusion in the community in relation to the whole notion of recycling, given that the Chinese government has pulled out of taking Australian recycled goods, and so there is that idea in the community whether actually goods that they take the time to recycle actually find a proper recycling outcome, and I think that and also on top of that we know that there's and we're informed by our contractors that there's a lot of contamination, if you like, in relation to the recycling program. Sometimes there is confusion in terms of what can be properly recycled and what goes into waste and things like that. I noticed, for example, in other countries, they're much more diligent than us in terms of how they actually divide their recycling. I went to Japan last year and it was fascinating to see there. One is that you don't see very much rubbish around the place, and secondly, when the rubbish that you do see, it's very much compartmentalised, which makes the cost and the implementation of a recycling program much easier. So what we're doing here, I think, is really good. I've looked at the report. I like the way it's been presented. It's very graphical and it's easy to understand, and also provides good education and good promotion for our community, and also to build that confidence in the community around recycling. The part that I've added there, again, is point number 5. I believe that we're not doing enough in relation to our multicultural community. In Darebin, as we know, there's over 120 different languages, nearly half of the people from diverse backgrounds. I don't need to go through the statistics, and I think we need to have a bit of a more concerted effort in relation to getting also our multicultural community behind this. And I must say, the multicultural communities generally, particularly the older generation, they recycle really well. And they use a lot of their food waste in their gardens and things like that. They're quite informed about doing that, and I think we have to reinforce that message with them. And so what I've been suggesting in point number 5 is that we use the Darebin Community News and provide advertisements notifications in different languages, and also I think we should use the video series where it could be a question of subtitles or voiceovers in different languages, and I think it'll come very, could be done quite cheaply, and it's quite an effective way, and also it'll enrich, if you like, our website and make it a little bit multicoloured, in a sense that rather than always just hearing English, what comes out of you, that you hear different languages, which reflect what you hear when you walk in the street and you hear over 120 different languages. Let's get the languages coming out of our website also.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Councillor Messina.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. I just want to share with you a little note that I just received this evening from a 10-year-old girl called Evie, who was sending me some information about waste and actually put a smile on my face. We talk about recycling, we talk about reuse, recycle, reproduce. The issue is that in order to change something, we need to change buyer behaviour. So we need to have practices in place to do that. And I believe this is a great start. It's not the answer. There's a lot more that needs to be done by the state government and the federal government in terms of that. Do I believe this will make a significant difference? I think it will. Let's not forget that on the 1st of July 2019, we are going to have an e-waste ban. Do we need to do more? I think we need to. But will we have the solution today, right this moment? We don't. Do we look at container deposit schemes? Do we look at waste to energy? These are things that futuristic people will be looking at, and these are things that we need to look at. Not only do we need to look at that at Darebin, we also need to do that at a state and a federal level. Is this the start of a change? Yes, a change to change consumer buyer behaviour in terms of that, but we need to do it in different languages. The issue I have is that when you take something away from a community, we're not telling them why. So in order to address the change in behaviour, we need to tell the consumers why we need to do that. Just like why we needed to wear seat belts, just why we needed to take away single-use plastic items. It didn't work for Coles and it didn't work for Safeway because they didn't inform the community as to why that needed to be done. So I'm happy to support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Williams.
I brought this to Council back in August as a notice of motion, and I want to say a huge thank you to the officers that have prepared a very detailed report. So I'm very proud to actually see this report. It's very simple to read and understand, but most of all, I believe it has some nice quirky things about it. If you go to page 343, where it says, I love the idea where you've got the squeeze, squish, flatten fridge magnets in 20 community languages, which you'll see on page 351. I think this is a great report, and I very much look forward to how we can continue in doing what I believe this is real true Council's role and business in helping our community, in educating them on being, for the future generation, on how we can be better people in recycling.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Amir, was that you? Yep.
There's been lots of community interest around reducing waste, particularly with the War on Waste program. I've been receiving lots of emails from residents who have been strongly advocating to Council to say, what can you do? Or here are some ideas of things you can do to reduce waste. And we saw in the Council annual report that waste in Darebin has been going down. In fact, we exceeded our targets in the last year around that happening. But it's not always straightforward, even for people who are looking for the information about what to do. It can be difficult to find, and for people who are busy with kids and jobs, it can be hard to prioritise waste reduction. So I'm absolutely really supportive of making it easy for people to do the right thing. Something else that I suppose is exciting, if you put it that way, about waste management is that it's something that everyone can get involved with. For some of our council services are for parts of the community, but waste reduction is something everyone can be involved with. And I know lots of kids are really passionate about protecting the planet for themselves and many years into the future. So I'll be excited to hopefully see young people, children, getting involved with that as well.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? No? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Next item is 8.5, Personal Training Reservoir Leisure Centre Fees and Charges. Moved by Councillor Rennie. Councillor Lawrence.
Madam Mayor, I've just got a question.
Okay, we'll just get a mover and seconder first and then we'll go to the question. Is there a seconder? Yep. Okay, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Lawrence.
Just through you, Madam Mayor, I was reading the report and I was trying to understand what the $12 swim is, what quantum increase is it? And the other thing seemed to be missing is it has a discussion about the cost of a single parent family versus a two-parent family, but then we're only printing in the report the new charges we're adopting. So I just wanted to know what is the comparison of that missing data for the two-parent family.
Did you understand the question? No? So we've introduced a new fee for a 1 adult with children fee. Yeah? What is the other family pass and how much is it?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it was just, what's the current fee, single use, $12 or $10, whatever it is?
For a family?
What's the quantum change?
Yeah.
From the current status? And then two, it talked about an issue between previous policy, single parent family with kids paying more than a two-parent family with kids. But then we don't have that figure there. So it's just where do we end up in that case?
So in terms of the answer to the first question of a single parent family and what it used to be, it's a new fee, so there's no comparison to make. Yep. But do we have the fee for the other family swim pass that is available?
Mayor LeSurf, this is Michael Pogomiller, who's coordinator of Reservoir Leisure Centre.
Good evening. The current...
Sorry, the microphone isn't on, so just want to push that so it goes green. Yep.
Okay,
great.
there we go. So the current fees for families for 2 adults and up to 3 children is $16.40, and a concession price of $14.35.
Thank you. Did that answer your question?
And so the report's not clear. So we're increasing the fee from 10 to 12 for the standard entry? I'm not sure.
No, so that family pass will remain, and it is proposed that we introduce a second type of family pass for single parents. So there will be 2 types of.
I'm just going to the second part of information I was seeking, which is, I'm a simple person, just like the numbers. We're voting for a number, it says something $12.
$12.2065, yep.
What is it currently?
The fee doesn't exist, so it's not anything currently. It's a new type of fee. So currently, if you're a single parent and you take your kids to the pool and you want to pay, you can either buy a family swim pass which entitles 2 adults and children, or you can pay for the individual amounts and you'd pick whatever is cheaper. So this allows for one parent to take their children at a lesser cost. Councillor Greco.
While I ask you a question, I just want to, because I was a bit unsure when I read this report, and I'm sorry that I didn't pick this up earlier with the officers, but I wasn't clear from what we're moving from and to, particularly when you look at a page 357, the group fitness multi-visit passes, new fees. It says new fees were not included in the schedule, and I just want to know what the fees are now, and what we're going to try and correct this to.
Okay, so there are three types of things that are being thrown together. Give us a copy? Oh, well, because it's all written out here. All right, Ms. Henderson, do you want to answer it?
Mayor Lasself, we've both got the same information, I think, which is that there's three categories of recommendations here for fee changes. The first is for new fees that don't currently exist. So that's for personal training, which is in fact a service that hasn't existed for some time, and for group fitness multi-visits pass, and for family swim passes, which will actually be better for people, be cheaper for people. There's one fee that has no increase, it was just left off by mistake, and that's the work cover memberships, which will be the same as 17-18. And then there's 3 fees which were included in the 18-19 fee schedule, but they weren't added with CPI. They didn't have CPI added. But all the other swim school fees in the 18-19 schedule did have CPI added. And as a result, the relativities between the bulk buying of sessions versus a single session have gone skew-whiff. So those fees, which are 3 of them, the Learn to Swim debit fortnightly for 44 weeks has gone up from $27 to $27.70. So that's 70 cents. It's about 2.5%. The swim lesson for adult term payment for 44 weeks has gone up from $15 to $15.40, and the swim lesson for adult debit fortnightly for 44 weeks has gone up from $30 to $30.80. So in each case, about 2.5%.
I just have a supplementary question. I understand that. I'm grateful for the explanation. In relation to the concession fees, what's happened there? What's the movement there? Because each of those fees would also have concession fees associated with them. Yep.
Through you, Mayor Lasself, the concession fees already had CPI added in them, so they were part of all the other swim school fees that did have CPI added. There were just these 3 fees that by mistake didn't have CPI added.
Thank you.
And a final question, so that we get this absolutely clear.
Let's get it all out of the way. Yep.
The other one is the work cover membership, no change from 217 to 18. So we're not proposing any change in relation to that? If not, why not?
The decision to not increase was it doesn't necessarily it's slightly skewed compared to the others, so therefore the decision was to not increase the price to maintain its relativity towards non-work cover memberships. Do you want to explain what so work cover membership is for those eligible through TAC, work cover. So to keep the prices closer to what a regular membership was, the decision was not to increase CPI on the work cover memberships.
Okay. So we'll go and we'll hear from the mover, which was Councillor Rennie.
Thank you. In large part, this report really reflects a correction for a few omissions and minor details. What I'm particularly pleased to see is that one of the new fees, which came as a direct result of our budget discussions, was to introduce a family pass, recognising that single parents in our community were effectively disadvantaged by having to get a family pass that really enabled them to go in with 2 adults, and that meant they didn't get the benefit of the family pass. So the introduction of a single parent family pass, I think, actually means that we are catering more for those families who frequently have fewer resources in our community, and I think that's a really worthwhile addition and a way of catering for people who may not have the same resources in our community.
Thank you. And Councillor McCarthy, you were second?
Look, I don't really have much to add. I think it's actually a rare thing for us to actually be dealing with fee schedules in the course of outside of the budget process, and I think that there are obviously unusual circumstances here. But I think I just echo the point. I think not only to see new options, but also to see obviously the introduction of personal training at the site, and I think that's really important that we're continuing to look at what the service offering is at each of our centres. And obviously with Reservoir, it is a centre that council actually runs directly rather than contracting it to another organisation, like in the case with Northcote. So on that basis, happy to support the fee schedule. It seems like there's been a fair amount of rigour that's gone into the numbers, and obviously these things get reviewed on an annual basis anyway.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Greco?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I just want to include a third point, which I think when I look here at the recommendation, it's a pretty dry recommendation, and just in terms of just correcting the amounts. But I just think of myself, if I was a member of the gym, I mean, what would that mean when I go to the gym in the following weeks and the fees have increased?
Hang on. Are you proposing your amendment?
Yeah, so my amendment is, I've explained what it is. I should have done it the other way around.
Yeah.
That the third point would be that we develop an appropriate communication strategy to explain the corrections, omissions, and the introduction of new services.
Okay, is that accepted by the mover and seconder? Yep. Yes, from Councillor Reddy and from Councillor McCarthy. Can you give those words?
Nothing further to add, self-explanatory.
Okay. Can you pass those words to the officers so that we can get them written up? Okay. Are there any further speakers? Do people want to wait until that's written up on the screen? Yeah. Yep. Do we need a comma there between? Yeah, correct.
Can I just, with your indulgence, ask that the words "as per the report" be added at the end, because there's.
I'm not sure that we can. No, that's pretty self-explanatory.
Well, it's a communications plan referred to in the report, so we don't want to contradict ourselves.
Is that it? Yep, okay. Are there any, I'll just check again, are there any further speakers? No, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Moving now to 8.6, Vic Roads surplus land. So that's moved by Councillor McCarthy, seconded by Councillor Amir. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, there's obviously a bit of history to this particular item, and as councillors would see from the report, the first approach that council had from Vic Roads in relation to this was back in 2014. Obviously, the position that council's had over the years has shifted a little bit, but where we are at this stage is needing to provide some indication as to what we see as the right way forward. And I just draw councillors' attention to the recommendation, which is to state very clearly to the Minister for Planning the council does not support the proposal to rezone this land at 1 to 11 McMahon Road Reservoir from Public Park and Recreation Zone, and that council proposes a surrender of the land to DELP, Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, or a transfer of the land to council at no cost in order to ensure the retention of the land at open space. There are very good reasons why council would make that approach and take that position. That is a similar position to other parcels of land that we have had in state possession, and where we have identified that there may be either a biodiversity value, an open space value, or a public use value that is otherwise not realised. In this case, we are at that stage where we have asked that the Minister, by virtue of this report, should it be supported, asking the Minister to actually hand that land to Council or to DELP for the purposes as outlined. There is obviously a couple of steps to go here, and my understanding, and I'd ask officers to correct me if I'm wrong, is that this is not the last bite on the cherry, but is an indication in the process. Because we need to make very clear, given how long this goes back, where we stand in relation to the rezoning matter. This land is not currently being offered to council for purchase. It's actually a question about our position in relation to this. So if I'm wrong in my understanding of that, I'd ask officers to please let us know. It is really important that we maintain that principle as well, which we have maintained in this chamber, which is that public land such as this obviously continues in that way, and that wherever possible is actually gifted to council or another authority for that management purpose. I won't continue on further, but I would just note that there is a review that Council is actually undertaking of our open space strategy, which will be coming to Council soon, and that's as referred to on page 44. And this piece of land would be considered as part of that open space provision. We are looking to see a net increase in green open space provision in the City of Darebin, so we don't want to lose open space, including this, because that makes it a lot harder for us to achieve that policy outcome should it be supported in the broader open space strategy. So I'll end it there.
Before we go on, I might just get advice from the officers, because I think you made an assumption that is actually incorrect. So I'll ask Ms Bishop to respond.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just in regard to the bite of the cherry, I would recommend to Council that if you make your intent clear that at this stage you're looking for the land to be transferred to us for no consideration, should the Minister not accept that, they would obviously consider opportunities with Vic Roads, and if they agreed to the changing of the zoning, Vic Roads may respond very quickly to that. So I would suggest that, depending on tonight's resolution, we act very quickly with the Minister to find out exactly what their position is so that we don't miss any opportunities. Thank you.
I just have a question, if I may, Mayor. I think we clearly need to understand about this second bite of the cherry. From what I've read of the report, there is no second bite of the cherry, in that if the Minister, if we pass this motion, is that we want the land for free, and we've done that in the past.
So will they come back to us?
Will they come back to us, or will they be then free to go to Vic Roads and say, well, the council's not interested as a party, it's expired its time, and you do with it as you wish?
Thank you for the question, through you, Chair. That we have to be specific. The Minister has asked, do we have an interest in the land? So depending on the resolution, if the interest is yes, we do have an interest in the land, and it may be that we would like it, retained by Council. So I think we need to be very specific in how we articulate the resolution that yes, we do have an interest in that, and then maybe options that we can enter into a discussion with the Minister on that. So once again, the question from the Minister was very specific. Do we have an interest in the land?
If I could just ask a supplementary question. It's a very important point that's raised by our officer. But what I need to understand, I think that we need to understand as councillors, is what are the statutory recourse that we have in then saying one way or the other that we want to actually either purchase the land or say no, that we no longer want the land. How is this property in terms of whether it passes to council or not as a cost or not? What's the statutory framework that we're operating in?
What I'll do is I'll refer that to our Senior Property Officer, Jen Patterson. Thank you, Councillor.
Through you, Madam Mayor. In regards to it goes through the property asset management strategy. That's how it's been determined as necessary. There's a framework that was provided, I think, as part of this report that shows you a series of questions before we get to the point of whether we require it. And that's the framework that we've utilised to determine whether it's required.
So maybe it's me. I'm just not clear.
Hang on. We'll just get Ms Bishop is just going to have one more go.
Because I don't want this opportunity to slip us by. That's
So, great question. Through the Chair, I would suggest that there is a possibility that this opportunity may slip through. So, councillors, you need to really consider what your resolution will be tonight, because if we go back to the Minister to say, yes, we're interested, but we expect that to be transferred to us, we may be losing the opportunity.
Okay. Then the question that follows from that is that if we were to say that we're interested in the land, what is the asking price by Vic Roads? I understand it's $140,000. That's the asking price. So if we cough up $140,000, it's ours. Is that, it seals it?
That's all right. I'm getting used to this. Through you, Ms. Lassurf. In regards to it, that value has been, we've had our valuer provide that valuation. That is not the value that's been provided by Vic Roads. Vic Roads have not provided us with the value, even though we have asked them for it. It was more that we needed to get a value to understand what the open space rate would be for that land.
And the value is being provided at the open space as an open space zoning,
Yes.
not as a residential zone.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Look, on the basis of
Hang on. We've got a mover and a seconder. We've heard from the mover, so we'll go to the seconder now, and then we can do other things. Councillor Amir.
Open space is something that is very much needed all across the municipality. So it is disappointing that we haven't seen that transfer as requested under the previous council. I absolutely believe that this land should stay in public hands. We're going to be seeing more and more people living, moving to Darebin, growing up in Darebin. So as much as possible, we're going to need to retain the green space. I think the recommendation before us strikes that balance of having clarity while also being really clear about the responsibilities of the state government as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Greco.
Yes, Mayor, I'll need some help here, given the information that we've received about that this may be our last chance to actually secure this land, because it reminds me a lot of Reuben, what happened there, and we went through a whole series of issues there about initially we wanted the land to be transferred to us.
Are you speaking to the motion or are you proposing an amendment?
I'm putting an amendment. I'm going to put an amendment.
Speaking and then put your amendment with
Okay, so the amendment would be, and I need some assistance here from, because we're doing this thing, because in light of the information that we've received, where we say there in point number 2, or the land, second line, land to council at no cost in order to ensure the retention of the land is open space. Given that we've valued the land at $140,000, that's our valuation, that we say that the transfer of the land to council at $140,000 as per council's valuation, in order to ensure the retention of the land as open space. I think that...
Okay, so hang on, let's get the amendment up there and see if it's accepted, and then if not, we can go into a debate.
Okay.
Did we get those words? Because I'm not sure I did.
So all I'm saying, okay, we'll change that, instead of at no cost, is that at the cost of $140,000, which is the amount that I saw in the report, in terms of our valuation. There on page 363, where it says the value of the land has been estimated at $140,000.
Just one moment on that proposed amendment. The CEO would like to raise a point. Oh, you've got it. Yep.
Councillor, if I might suggest possibly you might consider two things. The first is perhaps you would put up to 140,000. Okay. Yep. And then the other thing you might do is write to add a third point, which is write to the Minister and request that Council be given first right of refusal in any further negotiation, just to sort of give an intention. I can't guarantee that would occur, sorry not to enter debate, I can't guarantee that would occur, but at least it gives a clear intent.
So there's some advice about the amendment in terms of what you were seeking. Are you happy with it?
I think that expresses the, my intent. Yeah.
Okay, we'll go to the mover and second to see if that's acceptable.
Just waiting to see the words.
Yeah, okay, all right. Okay, that's like paying both sides, isn't it? Okay, sorry. Does the mover and seconder accept that?
Yes, I accept those words.
Councillor Rennie? Oh, hang on. Did you? Councillor Amir, sorry. Okay, so they've been accepted. So it will become the substantive motion. Thank you, Councillor Greco. Do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, I'll speak to look. And I thank the mover and the seconder for accepting that amendment. I think what that does, it covers off on all bases, given the information that we've heard tonight, that this essentially could be our last bite at this at the cherry in relation to this land, and we don't want to, because of all the advocacy that we've done, we don't want to lose it. We don't want to get into a situation where we almost lost Reuben, because we had the initial position where we said that we wanted the land to be transferred to us for free, and I think that is a principled position. That, but sometimes the practicalities of life get in the way, and we're not talking about millions of dollars like in Reuben. I mean, we were strung by the nose in terms of how much money we had to pay for that, which was all up over $7 million. Here we're talking about, we're putting a reasonable offer. It's $140,000, which is based on our valuation as open space land. That's what we're going to use it for. We're not going to buy the land and put 20-storey developments on it. We're going to use it, continue to use it as we historically have done for open space. Also, we have the money. And the money is, if you look on page 363, we have $10.1 million in regards to our reserve. Our reserve specifically covers situations like this, where we purchase open space land, even though we've been managing it and we've been spending, I think, about $10,000 a year for the upkeep of the place. So I think the motion, the way it's worded now, puts us in a stronger position. And to make sure that at the end of the day, this stays as public land. And on the basis of that, I'm hoping that councillors will support the motion, and that we can then proceed in this way in our negotiations with the Minister or the department, whoever it may be.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Councillor Rennie?
Thank you, Councillor Greco, and I'm delighted to support this amendment. I actually think it's a very sensible way forth, and note particularly the speed at which my colleagues from Rucker Ward and Kazali Ward also supported the idea of this investment in Latrobe Ward, because we know a good investment and of course are willing to make these investments.
Sorry, come on guys. I know it's late, but can we just keep some order, please?
It's chicken feed.
So
but I'm still sitting here to get it.
We know that the really important thing and the thing that matters here is actually retaining this land as open space, and I believe that this is probably the strongest pathway forward to achieve that outcome.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Are there any further speakers? I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Next item is 8.7.
If I could, I'd like to move a procedural motion that we consider 8.7, 8.8 and 8.9 together, because they relate to very similar items.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a seconder? Councillor Amir. All those in favour? All those against?
Oh, I wanted to see.
Oh, hang on. Is everyone ready?
Hang on, what were they again? Sorry.
8.7, 8.8, 8.9.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I'll put that again. All those in favour and all those against. Motion is carried. We need to, before we do that, we need to perhaps extend time again for another 30 minutes to 11 o'clock. So
Happy
that's,
to extend time.
yep, so Councillor Messina was moving it, Councillor Williams second. All those in favour? That motion's carried. Okay, we'll move to considering 8.7, 8.8 and 8.9. It's moved by Councillor Rennie, seconded by Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Rennie.
Thank you. I'd like to move that the recommendations of the officers be accepted in each situation. These items all relate to very similar statutory processes, either for the discontinuance of rear lanes or the sale of lanes. In each case, the statutory processes have been adhered to and community have been offered an opportunity to have their say. It is good when these cases are resolved, I think, and does bring some additional resources to council.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy, would you like to speak?
I'll reserve my right.
Are there any further speakers? No? Councillor McCarthy? No, nothing further. I'll now put that to the vote. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Next is 8.10, proposed transfer of roads and reserves from a deregistered company. Councillor McCarthy, was that a hand to move?
Move it, yep.
And seconded by Councillor Mayor. Councillor McCarthy.
Yes, look, thank you, Mayor. This is also an unusual item, but also is a process which we need to undertake. In this case, there's been the offer of accepting title of roads and reserves, which are outlined in the report, and the requirement, obviously, as per the recommendation, to execute certain documents. It's an unusual situation here, which is that ASIC, which is an organisation, a government body, which we don't often have a lot of direct dealings with, certainly not in relation to property or roads and reserves, has approached council in regard to these items which are reserved for public purposes. And are registered in the name of a now deregistered company, and ASIC proposes to transfer title to council for this purpose. This is obviously not a pleasant situation for the deregistered company, but the reality here is that someone needs to take possession of these particular sites, and in this case ASIC has identified council as the appropriate body. I won't add too much more to it. I think the report's pretty self-explanatory, but one thing that I should note is that, as the report outlines, some of these roads have already been discontinued as roads by council. So we've already gone through a process in relation to some of these sites to say these are not roads. And in fact, it's now actually that council would be the main maintainer and effective owner as well.
Thank you. Councillor Amir? Nothing further. Any further speakers? No, I will put it to the vote. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Item 11, reports of standing committees. There are none. Item 12, records of assemblies of councillors held. 12.1, assemblies of councillors held. Moved by Councillor Messina, seconded by Councillor Rennie. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Now, can I please ask someone to suspend standing orders at this point to hear from a statement from Councillor Greco? So that's moved by Councillor Williams. To remove suspend standing orders. Suspend standing orders. Was that seconded by you, Councillor McCarthy? No, you didn't. Sure. Councillor Amir. Okay. All those in favour? Okay, that motion is carried. So we've suspended standing orders to allow Councillor Greco to make a statement.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, my statement is quite simple. I've decided to throw my beret into the ring in relation to the parliamentary elections for the seat of Preston, along with my colleague Susan Newton, and also, as per the rules, I've informed the CEO by email that when I was just before making my intention public, and to try and follow the protocol. And CEO courteously called me to congratulate me. I don't know what for, but but anyway, we'll have a shot, and we'll see what happens. Thank you for the indulgence.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Greco. So we can resume standing orders.
I wondered, because they're suspended, if I might say something very brief.
Do you have something that we don't know? Do we? Okay, Councillor Rennie, brief.
No.
Do I need a helmet?
I'd just like to say, may the best candidate win, and very best wishes to both of you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Rennie. we're not going to get into this now.
Make it a budget.
Can I request someone resume standing orders so that we can deal with the last item on the agenda, which I forgot. Councillor Rennie moved, Councillor Messina seconded. All those in favour? Motion is carried. So the last item there is reports by Mayor and Councillors. Moved by Councillor Rennie, seconded by Councillor McCarthy. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Consideration of reports considered confidential. There are none. And so that brings us to the end of the meeting. So we'll close the meeting at 10:25. Thank you for those who have stayed in the gallery.